lost their lives in the last 6 years because of drug addiction. And if we lost that many people in traffic crashes, he says there would be outcry. He told the group he was raised like many others, thinking drug users were bad people and criminals. But times change, and Larkin notes criminalization has disproportionately impacted marginalized groups and people of color, pointing out there's a ripple effect with drug addiction.
There's probably a nexus and a correlation between mental health and addiction and all the vicarious trauma that occurs that drives people to make decisions which are really not, nobody wakes up wanting to actually have an addiction.
Now, this call is not new by any means. The association started advocating for this move last year after about a decade of debate. It prompted the feds to look at their drug policy to try and reduce opioid-related deaths. And as part of this, the feds called on prosecutors then to go after only the most serious of drug possession offenses. I'm Mark Perry.
City News Time, 9:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas should have a fair amount of sunshine today. Some may have some lingering cloud. It's a cold day. Our high -11. That's it. It'll feel colder with the wind. Tonight, mainly clear. -20 will feel like -30. And plenty of sunshine for the weekend. -12 Saturday, -10 on Sunday. For today, the high -11.
And right now, it's -19, but feeling closer to -30 in both Smiths Falls and in Ottawa. As elementary and secondary students go back to in-class learning on Monday, some advice on masks that they will have to wear. OPH says a 3-layer mask is your best defense against COVID spread. This is made up of 2 layers of tightly woven fabric and a middle layer that acts as an added line of defense. Ottawa Public Health says contrary to what you may see, especially in this cold, scarves, balaclavas, neck warmers, they're not a substitute for a mask. After weeks of warnings, the Prime Minister expected to announce new restrictions on your international travel plans this morning. With more contagious variants of COVID-19 spreading rapidly, Justin Trudeau expected to announce that anyone returning from abroad will have to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel at their own expense. Johnson & Johnson says an 8-country clinical trial shows its single-shot COVID-19 vaccine was 66% effective at preventing moderate to severe illness. The number jumps to 85% in the level of protection it offers against the most serious symptoms. City News Time at 9:03. A 38-year-old man from Carleton Place facing charges of extortion and sexual assault. A Rideau Lakes OPP member contacted with a sex assault allegation back in October. After an investigation, Michael Elliott of Carleton Place was charged with those crimes, and he does remain in custody. Police believe there could be other victims or similar incidents involving other people. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Friday. We made it. Made it to the coldest day of the year. Yeah, the day's not done yet, but by the time this year is done, this one, January 29th, 2021, could be the coldest day of the year. It's certainly the coldest it's been so far this year. Yesterday had the record early morning. It was minus 18.8 dark and early yesterday morning, but by 7 o'clock this morning, it was minus 20. Now repeat after me. Okay, repeat after me. Okay, the weather is not the climate. The weather is not the climate. The weather is not the climate. And we really do need a $150 a ton carbon tax, or we may never see weather like this ever again. Good morning. This is the Rob Snow Show, Rogers TV, City News, all the great Friday fare. Just ahead for you, the legendary Lowell Green is going to join us just a few minutes' time. Believe you me, he is wound up. He is ready to go. Pierre Bourque from Bourque Newswatch. He'll be here right after the 9:30 news. Steve Warne, the Sens Nation podcast. My gosh, the Sens are bad this year. They are so bad. They're not even fun to watch. They're so bad. I wouldn't stay up late to watch them, and I didn't last night. Queen's Park Week in Review. with our MPPs to close out the show. It's been a very busy week for Premier Ford. And he has a news conference scheduled for this afternoon at 3 o'clock. Has something to do with testing international arrivals at the Pearson Airport under one of those Section 22 orders. You know, he's been sparring with the Trudeau Liberals about the situation at Pearson for weeks. Meantime, Mr. Trudeau, as you just heard in our newscast, he's doing his Rideau Cottage thing at 11:30 this morning, announcing his own travel restrictions in quarantine hotels. So travel is the focus today for politicians. It's an important topic for sure. It's by far the most important issue that politicians should be dealing with, though. The most important story and the most important issue facing the country remains vaccinations, the woeful state of the vaccine rollout in Canada. And I welcome your opinions on that again today when we do our Talkback Hour. We do that every morning between 10 and 11. Your phone calls, your opinions most welcome. It's been very busy all week. I've appreciated all your phone calls. And today it is the Friday free-for-all, so it's actually wide open on topics. Just about anything goes. At 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310, or the Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. And I want to get into the whole issue of vaccines again today. Because, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it obvious now? With each passing day, the news out of this country, the news out of this government, if you can get any news out of this government that's truthful, I mean, it just goes from bad to worse when it comes to vaccines. I see it's finally showing up in some of the opinion polling. I mean, 4 million doses, for example. How many times have you heard that? Trudeau's been hanging his hat on that number. Oh, don't worry, don't worry. We'll still have 4 million doses available by the end of March. Yeah, the end of March is 2 months from now, Mr. Trudeau. But now it seems it could be a case of, well, maybe not. Maybe we'll get 4 million doses. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it will only be 3.5 million doses. And September. Don't worry, just wait till September. You'll be able to get a dose by September. But then a big report this week from the Economist Intelligence Unit says that's not true either. That a more realistic time frame for Canada is the middle of next year before inoculations are widely available for the general population. The middle of next year. Next year. We're barely into this year. So look, here's one of the questions that I would have for you today. Who do you blame for this? Who do you blame for the current state of affairs with the vaccine rollout? Do you blame Trudeau? Some people in the media, they still want to blame Doug Ford. It's all Doug Ford's fault. Do you blame Pfizer? No, it's Pfizer. Pfizer waited until the vaccine was approved before it started upgrading its plant in Belgium. So, you know, some people have been accusing me, Rob, you're being too hard on Trudeau. Is that what you think? Am I being too hard on the guy? I spent a good deal of time this morning just looking back and going over all of the great journalism that has been done. And it has been, to the country's credit, some of the journalism that's been done. Because it really sheds light and runs counter to all of the half-truths and the outright lies that have come from the mouths of liberals about the vaccine rollout. And when you take it as a collective, when you examine it in its totality, it becomes clear the person to blame is Justin Trudeau. The buck stops at Rideau Cottage. And the man at the top, the most powerful person in this country, by far, Justin Pierre James Trudeau. It's his fault. If you can't get a vaccine, it's his fault. If a province has run out of vaccine, it's his fault. If there are delays getting vaccines from another country into this country, it's his fault. Because, and it is becoming clearer by the day, there were options for this country. There were made-in-Canada solutions to this problem. You read Licia Corbella in the Calgary Herald today, and her column, very enlightening. This prime minister didn't have the wherewithal to look within before he went abroad. And now, what do we have? We have a shortage of vaccines. We have a rise in vaccine nationalism, EU. We have a race on not just for vaccine doses, but now for specialized syringes, too. And all the while, new and more contagious variants of the virus are circulating in our communities. I blame Justin Trudeau. Who do you blame? In addition to that, I'd like to get your take on stay-at-home orders and curfews and where we are halfway through all of this. 2 weeks ago yesterday, the stay-at-home order came into effect in Ontario. It is supposed to stay in effect until the 9th of February, which is a week from Tuesday. In the last 2 weeks, the daily number of cases reported in the province of Ontario is down 37%. It's down 20% in just the last week. So whatever you think of the stay-at-home order, it seems to be working. So what should happen on the 9th of February? Should Doug Ford lift that stay-at-home order or keep it in effect and try to drive that case count even lower into the hundreds instead of the thousands? The reason I want to revisit this issue today is because of the news from the Premier of Quebec, François Legault. He said yesterday the curfew in Quebec isn't going anywhere. That curfew in Quebec is supposed to expire a week from Monday. And despite cases being down in Quebec by 56% since the curfew came into effect, the premier said it's not going anywhere. We're going to extend it. Probably by another month would be my guess, if I was a wagering man. But, you know, these two, Ford and Legault, they're kind of cut from the same cloth. They seem to think alike. What do you think Ford should do? Premier Legault says, despite the success of the curfew, we're going to keep it in effect. Soon it will be Doug Ford's term. 1 week from Tuesday, should he lift the stay-at-home order or keep it going? It's cold outside, but welcome to the hottest radio in town. It's the Rob Snow Show on City News.
In life,
News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Morning, Lowell.
There's only one person you can blame for the fact that we don't have any vaccines in this country today, and that's Justin Trudeau. A lot of people, Rob, oh, by the way, good morning. A lot of people still don't seem to understand that the federal government, headed by Justin Trudeau, has only one job when it concerns to vaccines. The federal government's responsibility, and they alone, was to acquire sufficient vaccines to vaccinate everybody in this country. Very clearly, they have not done the job. Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau alone, did not do the job, the only job they had. The other job, all the federal government is supposed to have done was bring the vaccines here, sign the contracts, order the vaccines, get the vaccines into Canada, and after that, according to the Prime Minister himself, it's up to the provinces to distribute, etc., etc. Very clearly, Justin Trudeau and Justin Trudeau alone is responsibility for the greatest screw-up I think this country has ever seen. Lives are being lost every single day. Businesses are falling. We are inconvenienced, locked in our homes, etc., 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 because the Prime Minister did not do his job. I was under the impression that he had stopped trying to negotiate with China. You recall that what all started this was that the Prime Minister thought that he could persuade China to come over to Montreal and manufacture vaccines there. He negotiated. I thought it was over in May, but apparently, according to the latest information, he tried to negotiate with China sometime until July. As a consequence, he did not begin ordering vaccines from other sources until either the first week or second week of August, at which time he was way, way, way behind everybody else. And by the way, I'm going to go through the countries that are way ahead of us. Now, there's two mistakes here, Rob, on that. Not only, and we're now the information is coming to light about how we absolutely turned down any attempt to have vaccines manufactured in Canada, either in Calgary, Toronto, or in Montreal. You just turned a blind eye, a deaf ear, and did not do it. We now know that had they done this, at the very least, we probably would have Canadian-made vaccines at least by this summer. The other mistake he made, and being so late, was that instead of being able to buy vaccines from Pfizer, which has the largest vaccine manufacturing plant in the world, 200 kilometers from us in Kalamazoo, Michigan, instead of being able to order there, instead he had to order from Europe. Some people don't seem to be getting this. We could and should have ordered, if we're not going to do it in Canada, which we should have gone to Pfizer when we were able to get it from Kalamazoo, Michigan, from the United States just across the border. We were so late that by the time he approached Pfizer, they were all sold out in the United States. So he had to go to Europe. Now we've got the problem with Europe. Are they going to deliver? Are they not? Et cetera, et cetera. But even if there wasn't a delay in Europe, the fact that we had to go to Europe rather than the United States or Canada means it's much longer. It's a much longer trip. There's more danger of damage to the vaccines in the trip. It's much more costly, and it takes a hell of a lot more time. He has left us in an untenable position. I repeat, people are dying by the hundreds, and if we don't, and you're right, this report from the Economist says that we probably won't be fully vaccinated in this country until the middle of next year. He says that Canada will be, quote, the Economist says Canada will be 6 months in having people vaccinated, 6 months behind Europe and the United States. Rob, can you imagine that just across the border, in northern New York, that essentially by the time almost everybody there has been vaccinated, they're wide open, everything is open, no lockdowns, etc., that we are still in heavy lockdown in this country, people are still dying because Trudeau didn't do his job. Let me just go through And just stick with me for a minute here.
Sure.
Let me just go through the countries that in the last 10 days have vaccinated more people on a per capita basis than Canada. Israel, United Arab Emirates, Serbia, the UK, Iceland, Ireland, Bahrain, the United States, Malta, Romania, Switzerland, Poland, France, Germany, Spain, Turkey, Brazil, Italy, China, and then Canada. Beautiful, eh? Beautiful. We are 20th. 19 other nations in the world that we are aware of are vaccinating far more people on a per capita basis than we are here in Canada. When countries like Brazil, Turkey, Malta, and Iceland, and Poland, by the way, when they're vaccinating more people than we are, you know we're in trouble here.
Yeah. Did you read that? I sent you Lucio Corabella's column in the Calgary Herald this morning. Isn't that something else? Doesn't she just nail it right there?
Oh, absolutely. And finally, some members of the press. But I've got to tell you.
Yeah, well, she's always great. She's so good.
I watched last night To Power and Politics with, what's her name, Vasily Capella or whatever the hell her name is.
Vasily Capella's, yeah.
I have never seen, I don't think, the kind of hostility that she displayed towards Erin O'Toole. This woman, they were talking about vaccines, and O'Toole was trying to point out some of the things that hadn't happened, et cetera, et cetera. You could see the expression on her face. She hated O'Toole. She as much as called O'Toole a liar. I mean, it was unbelievable. Now, I mean, O'Toole has said that if he becomes prime minister, he essentially is going to shut down sections of the CBC. It was very clear but that the fact that a woman showing this amount of disdain and outright disrespect for the leader of the opposition, it's been a long time since I've seen that kind of terrible journalism. I'm going to tell you this. She would not have treated the prime minister like that.
Well, I don't know. I listened to The World at 6 this morning on CBC Radio. Their top story was about a postal carrier who didn't want to deliver the Epoch Times. So that was the big story for them this morning. So.
There's another story, Rob, that I have been following.
Everybody cares about that.
Yes, but there's another story that I'm going to tell you is going to shake this country if something doesn't change. I'm sure that you have followed the story concerning Line 5.
Oh yes, yeah.
This is very, very, very serious stuff.
Yeah. This is the Enbridge pipeline.
This is
from Michigan.
Line 5 is the Enbridge pipeline that brings gas. Natural gas, propane, the stuff they make propane, oil, et cetera, from Western Canada through to the refineries in Sarnia.
Yeah.
It supplies, according to all of the facts that I've been able to acquire, if Line 5 is shut down, and I'll go into this very quickly, if Line 5 is shut down, as the governor of Michigan wants it to happen, they supply 45% of all the gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, and propane for Ontario and Quebec. 45%.
Yeah.
Now the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmore, she has already applied. She has a court case now. She has said that Enbridge has until May the 11th to shut this pipeline down. The problem, she says, is that it goes under the water through the Straits of Mackinac. She says that it's 65 years old. It was built in 1953.
Yeah.
She says that if there is a leak, it would poison all of the water in the Great Lakes. Thus, she has applied for a court action, an injunction, to close that pipeline down.
Yeah. And even though her own regulator says what she's saying is not true, so yeah.
Yeah, but the court case is there, and one of the problems. Not only that, but there's a danger now with Biden. I mean, there's an anti-pipeline move, as we all know, particularly as it applies to Western oil.
Yeah.
And the federal government, to this point, has done absolutely nothing to defend the case, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to watch this very closely.
Yeah, it's going to be a big story. It should be a bigger story than it is, but it's for us. It's we've been hammering away on vaccines. I still think that's the biggest story.
So.
But imagine this. Imagine this: supplies of jet fuel for Pearson Airport cut in half. Gasoline supplies for Toronto cut in half.
Absolutely.
And then Because it goes from Sarnia, the Line 5, then hooks up to Line 9, which goes into the refineries in Montreal as well, in and around Montreal.
Yes, but let me just say something. Actually, Line 5 supplies 100% of the jet fuel for Pearson Airport.
Okay, well, there you go. Okay.
And the federal government, once again, sitting on its hands, doing sweet bugger all, Rob, did absolutely nothing, continues to do absolutely nothing to defend Keystone, and is doing absolutely nothing to defend Line 5. All of those anti-pipeline people, if in fact Line 5 is shut down, I wonder where the anti-pipeline people are going to be when you got to turn your temperature down in your house to 10 degrees. Okay. Anyway, you're absolutely right. Listen, good for you.
Thank you.
Both you and I, as you know, I have my own little show. Both you and I have been pounding away on the vaccines for a month now. You and I were in the vanguard of this. Well, nobody else seemed to be paying any attention. You and I kept saying, listen, we're in trouble here. He's left it ordering this way too late.
Plus,
we're going to be far behind. Finally, the media, at least some sections of the media, aside from the CBC, is catching on.
There's solutions. Plus, there are solutions in this country that we should have seized upon, but instead we were doing this dance with this Chinese company.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I say there are two things. We didn't order Canadian vaccine. We didn't do anything to manufacture it locally, and we left it so late we couldn't buy from the United States. Imagine this. The largest vaccine manufacturer in the world is 200 kilometers from us. We can't buy from them because we left it too damn late. Instead of that, we got to buy from Europe, which now threatens to shut it down.
Gotta go. Thank you. Thank you, Lowell. Bye-bye. Yeah. Lowell Green, Kalamazoo. I had David just look it up. Kalamazoo is actually 600 kilometers away from Toronto, right? So it's not 200. Just, fact check. 5-hour drive, 6-hour drive. But it's closer than Belgium. The news is coming up. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
And the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, January 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 19. Feels like minus 30. In Smiths Falls, minus 18. Feeling like minus 27 in the wind. Here's what's making news this hour. As you prepare the back-to-school checklist for your kids, again, include 3-layer masks. Ottawa Public Health says on Twitter this morning the best defense against COVID would be a 3-layer mask. Outer layers of tightly woven fabric with a layer in between is the best protection. OPH does point out things like balaclavas, scarves, and neck warmers are not a substitute for a mask. Prime Minister is set to lower the boom on international travel. Justin Trudeau expected to announce some new restrictions this morning as more infectious variants of COVID-19 spread around the globe. The restrictions could include forcing anyone returning from abroad to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel at their own expense. For those looking for a little inspiration that the downward COVID curve is a sign of better times coming, Canada's Wonderland says it's planning on opening in May. The amusement park in Vaughan says visitors will have to follow some public health protocols like mask wearing and distancing. As it stands, non-essential businesses across the province, though, are closed by emergency order. It's not clear when amusement parks would be allowed to open. City News Time, 9:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Pierre Bourque is here from Bourque Newswatch. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. Good morning. Boy, your friend, our friend Lowell Green, fired up this morning. Fired up.
Yeah. Are you?
Well, look at.
Are you? I am too.
I've got the fire on here as well because it's colder in the West End, Rob. I don't know about the chair, but we've got the fire going here.
Good.
Look, I want to riff off of the vaccine thing. That's our story. It's been our story for the last little while.
It's your top story this morning. Trudeau's fate twists in vaccine wins.
Yeah, and then we had the news yesterday of Rick Hillier, who I like and I admire, and I thank him for his service to the country. But I found it a little passing strange that he's accepted a part-time gig with a Bell's Corners defense company, and kudos to the defense company for getting him. But, in my mind, at this critical juncture of what's going on in the vaccine, every minute not spent on trying to figure that out is a minute lost for the rest of us as well. So it's a good point you make. Is now really the time to be moonlighting, right? Well, it's not the time for a part-time gig, and let's not forget he's getting paid $20,000 a month for his efforts on our behalf. I also found out, this may be news to your newsroom, but the Government of Ontario Health Department Assistant Deputy Minister in charge of the vaccine rollout is quitting, and he's leaving to take a job at Brock University. So then you start to wonder, what the heck? At a time when you need the top dogs all rowing in the same direction and not jumping off the ship, what's going on?
Right. Okay. Who do you blame? If we're going to start pointing fingers about the current state of affairs, I mean, this is not a world-beating performance in this country when it comes to getting shots in arms. Where does the blame lie?
Well, look, I think you got to go back a ways. You don't start a pharmaceutical company from scratch out of nowhere, and that it took time for us to come to this problem. But you don't know you've got a problem until you find out you've got a problem.
Right.
If your heater in the house breaks down this morning at minus 30, you really don't know that you had a problem until the thing breaks down. And I think that's a bit of the issue here. Plus, I want to give a bouquet here and a brick, just for the sake of the visuals here. In terms of the bouquet, if you will, this is not tried and true ground. It's not like we, in our lifetimes, even the older people, and, God bless Lowell and others that have been around a bit longer than us here, but it's not like they've lived through a pandemic and had to deal with it. Yes, there were wars and other dire circumstances, I'm sure, but this is a very different thing. And it's not like you pull out the playbook and say, okay, here's what we did the last time, let's do it now. Totally different. In fact, there are no benchmarks. So we're learning as we go along. I think we've learned a life lesson here, and unfortunately, it's one that's costing a lot of people their lives, and that's a big problem. The other thing is, and this is on the other side of it.
Right.
We should all be focusing on accessing vaccines and staying safe. And the amount of energy that's being invested in the foo-for-ahs of the Governor General Yeah, it's bad. It's terrible. And, goodbye. Salut la visite, out the door you go. And I have no reason to understand.
Yeah, but that's just a sideshow, right?
My point is the timing of that is somewhat suspect. I mean, they have the government of Canada, the government of all of provincial governments as well, but they are the pilot ships of the national government. The government of Canada has a life and death problem right now, a massive problem, the likes of which we've not seen in our lifetime. And what do? They pull out this shiny object and they make a foo-for-ah out of some person nobody thinks about. The Governor General of Canada.
Right.
Nobody thinks about her.
No.
And so they make that the prime story. And the Ottawa media, the political media, which are nothing but pilot fish, they can't think outside of that box to understand what's been going on. And it's disgusting.
Well, in fact, the departure of Navdeep Bains is much more curious than the departure that seemed all but inevitable anyway of Julie Payette.
Well, Payette doesn't...
Especially after the reporting of the last week about, CanSino and what was going on there at that report from iPolitics, for example. Now, Providence Therapeutics out of Calgary and what's been going on there and how there were these options and these solutions homegrown. GlaxoSmithKline and the Paul Lucas opinion piece in the Financial Post laying bare that, in fact, there is vaccine production already happening in this country and happening at scale. The GlaxoSmithKline actually has a massive production facility in a place called Saint-Foy, which is not far from Quebec City. And it makes most of the annual flu vaccine for Canada. So there's a lot of interesting things happening right now. And I feel sorry I get it. I've done programs about Julie Payette and what was going on there. And the way she treated the staff, terrible. And I feel sorry for the staff, and I hope they find some remedy, either through some kind of civil process or human resources or whatever the case might be. But it's on the back burner. It's not the most important issue facing the entire country right now.
Yeah, and I agree with you on everything you said, and I feel bad for the people that work there. Those 90-some people, I think, that came forward, right? Is that what it is?
Yeah, but 90 to 100 people, yeah.
But there are multiples of that number of people that are dying each and every day in Canada because of COVID.
Yeah.
Each and every day. And you watch the daily briefings, the daily Dougs, the daily, Legault, the rest of them across the country, and they've become immune to the numbers. Yeah. They'll say, well, 80 people died today, and my condolences to them. But I got some good news. It's like, what the heck? 80 people died. Had this happened 2 years ago, where 80 people died somewhere, it would be a calamity. It would be a calamity deserving of all of the attention.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And now it's like, well, that was 80 yesterday. We're down from 85, and whoops. But, man, each one of those people that has died has a family, has a place in the community, right? Yeah. Has friends, has a story, has a history, has a life, and that's gone now, snuffed out. And the fact that we don't have vaccines, I guess this is my end point here, is the fact that the access to vaccines is being delayed means that people are going to die that should not have been dying, and that's yet to come. But it's unfortunate, but it's reality.
And then I read a story this morning. And maybe there'll be more media inquiries about this as the days go on. Blacklocks has the story this morning. $150 million more for SNC-Lavalin. Quote, the Department of Public Works, in an inquiry of ministry tabled in the Commons, said it hired SNC-Lavalin only weeks after the pandemic outbreak, a contract in support of the government's COVID-19 response. Awarded to SNC-Lavalin April 8th of 2020 to design and deliver mobile health units. The contract is valued at $150 million. $150 million. April 8th, 2020. So how many months ago is that now? 9 months ago? Where are these mobile health units? Have they been designed? Have they been delivered for the $150 million that they're scheduled to be paid by the government of Canada? And why are we hiring SNC-Lavalin again? You know, a company that has been convicted of bribery and fraud and laundering the proceeds of crime and has been blacklisted by the World Bank. It's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with that story.
I know, pandemic declared in March. Literally 2-3 weeks later, SNC-Lavalin lands a $150 million contract. Anyway, same old, $150 million contract. Imagine the vaccine research and development and production capacity you could scale up for $150 million. Right, in this country.
SNC-Lavalin is an interesting story. It's deserving of one of those untold tell-alls, because they've been very, very deeply embedded into official Ottawa for decades, literally decades and decades and decades. Their relationships go deep. They're deeply rooted, and I think they are, if nothing but resilient, and they are certainly resilient at that. We got a story up today. Ottawa issued a tender for 100,000 COVID tests a day, and they're going to use that on asymptomatic people at airports. 100,000 COVID tests a day. I start to wonder, who the heck is traveling to the point that you need 100,000 COVID tests a day?
Yeah, that's a good question, Pierre. It's a good question. Let me ask you, because I know, I just want to, away from this, another big story this week has been what's going on in the markets, and I know you're in tune to it all. By the way, Bitcoin's on the run again today. It's up like $4,000 this morning, 4,200, almost 37,000 US.
Yeah, and a day or two ago it was down at 28.
29, yeah, I saw it at 29, but so it's on the run again. What do you think of this Reddit revolt? Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and let me preface by saying, and I try to say this all the time, people that see a run, whether that's on GameStop or BlackBerry or Bitcoin, if you've got some mad money, that's what you want to do, then have some fun. But take it to the casino, it's more or less the same thing. In the case of the Reddit rebellion, well put, by the way, well put. That, to me, is a fantastic story about how social media is impacting established elements of society, in this case, high finance, and more particularly Wall Street.
Wall Street.
When you look at the tools that Wall Street has, our old friend John Budden, you'll remember him.
Sure.
If he and I and you were having a beer and talking about some of the machinations that happen in Wall Street, but all of the different products that they sell, the common person would be lost with a giant headache for days to come because it's so complex and so widespread. So you got the little people out there, and they like GameStop. For whatever reason, they talk about it, and they're gamers in many cases, so they say, let's save GameStop, and at the same time, let's teach a lesson to Wall Street, which has been trying to
Let's stick it to Wall Street, Let's stick it to the suits, right? Sure.
Yeah. And I think that's a lesson learned. Look what social media did, and the internet itself, the rise of the internet has done to the postal service. It's done to the newspaper industry, and you could go on and on through to the banking sector itself, to the retail bank. When was the last time you went into a bank and saw a lineup? Never.
When was the last time I went into a bank, actually?
Precisely.
Right? Yeah.
Precisely. But that would have been a regular occurrence for every citizen.
Oh, yeah.
And, you remember the older woman on Beechwood in the Royal Bank, and I think she challenged the then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. She said, thank you, Charlie Brown, something to that effect. Anyways, those days are far behind us, and what you're seeing now is a revolution online. And it's being done because it's so fast for like-minded people to find themselves, to coalesce around a cause, and to create action from their passion.
Great stuff this week. You got those bunny slippers on? I know you he likes to sit. This is what Pierre likes. He likes to sit in the recliner. He fires up the wood stove and he slips on his bunny slippers. And he thinks about all the big issues that are out there.
Rob, if it weren't for the fact I'm not allowed to go too far from my home for family reasons, I got to stick with everybody, as everybody does, I'd be up at Lac Tortier doing some ice fishing this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the huts are out, actually. Yeah.
Be great.
Great stuff. Talk to you later.
Good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Right,
yep. Pierre Bourque of Bourque Newswatch. Back with Dr. Doug Manuel on the latest projections for Ontario for COVID-19 and what we should make of the news about these variants, the mutant strains of coronavirus. This is City News.
Was devastating, and it's devastating to all small business, but not knowing where it was going to go. But then the renovation market, as people stayed home, took off like wildfire. And for us, yes, we're very lucky, very fortunate that we were able to turn things around. I think a lot of it had to do with our internet presence as well, that I was, kept working on over years, and then it kind of took off. So that was very positive. But now, no, people are staying at home. We're renovating different markets, whether it's a kitchen or a backyard or, your fireplace. They want to cozy things up. So yes, things are extremely busy right now. Right now it's fireplaces, and I think with the snowbirds, a lot of those clients have existing wood fireplaces, so they're looking at inserts. So they want to convert the wood to gas. They don't want to deal with the wood part of it, but they want it clean and easy and efficient, and that's been a major, major increase in our business. The cottage and chalet market has really increased, absolutely. We see that people, that's their staycation now, is either the backyard or their cottage with their close bubble of family. So there's no question that we've seen a big, big increase in that area as well. I've seen a change in the backyard because now the staycation, from my past being in the pool business, one of our great clients was in the other day, and he's in the pool business. He's booking for 2022. For in-ground pools, okay? So I think what's happened now is that's brought everybody back home, and I think maybe down the road, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're still gonna see people spending time in their backyards and staying home more. The barbecue area, really, we call it the backyard. So you walk out of your house into a backyard, and it kind of looks like that with the fencing and the sky and things like that. So that is just our fun room. It's just, there's a lot of cool gadgets there that has to do with dealing with charcoal and wood pellet barbecues. To go online, you're going to find, you just Google, romantic fireplaces will come up. The one nice thing about our work is that when the Google reviews and the Google pictures are phenomenal. We're uploading stuff every day. I have at least 1,000 jobs, real jobs that you can take a look at, either on the Google pictures on the drive, or if you go to our website at romanticfireplaces.com and click on Our Work. It's where we used to load lots of them up, but there's lots of pictures there too. But the great thing about that is they're real. There's testimonials there about people talking about our team. And our team here is unique to everybody else. It's two small teams, but these fellas work for me. They're our guys. So when they go into your home, they care as much about your house.
And City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So there was another update this week from health officials in Ontario. COVID-19 cases are decreasing across the province. In fact, just did some quick math this morning. They're down about 38% in just the last 2 weeks. Overall cases across the province. But at the same time, the same health officials say the spread of the UK variant presents a quote-unquote significant threat to controlling the pandemic. So we're joined once again this morning here on the Rob Snow Show by Dr. Doug Manuel, Professor of Epidemiology, University of Ottawa, member of Ontario's Science Advisory Table. Good morning again, Doctor.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's nice to hear from you. Why is it a significant threat?
It's that increased transmission. So I think we're getting a little bit better picture, 30 to 50% increased transmission. So 30 to 50% faster spread than the current variant. That's the issue.
Okay. And why is that an issue then?
Well, so basically every person who gets infected, there's going to be, a 30 to 50% increased chance they're going to infect another person, given the sort of same controls. So spread faster. Spread faster. So more disease, right? And the potential for more severe disease. Yeah. Right. Okay. So with that, then, and I'm sorry if I ask you dumb questions, but no. I like to dumb things down for myself. Okay. So you and I have talked over these many months about this R number, the RO number, the reproduction number, and health authorities really want to see that number to be less than 1. That if you can get that number to be below 1 and keep it there for a sustained period of time, the disease declines and eventually may disappear. Fair enough? That's right. Right? Okay. How could, if at all, the variants impact that R number? So what we see in UK right now, there's two variants spreading, and they've got control measures. And for the previous variant, they have an R of 0.9. Okay. So the number of people so it's declining for the old variant. The number of people who are being infected with the old variant is decreasing. At the same time, they have this new variant circulating, and its R number is 1.3, 1.4. So it's increasing. Right. So given given the same sort of level of control, the R number will go down faster or be lower with the old variant and not as low with the high variant. So in that situation, in the old days for UK, they would be great. They'd be seeing that they'd be get few cases and they'd be easing up. But now it was increasing. Now more recently, the cases overall have been decreasing in the UK. So they were able to increase restrictions, increase lockdown, and still be able to get that R naught. It looks to be like a preliminary that R naught for the new variant down below 1. I didn't even know if that was going to be possible. So that's good news this week. That we're seeing a number of countries who are further ahead of us in terms of the variant and have higher disease numbers that are in decline. So there is some hope here still. There's a lot of significant headwinds, but some hope. I think like headwinds, like, you're walking against the wind, COVID's pushing you back, and now the wind's just really picked up and it's pushing you harder and harder. It's interesting. I did a lot of reading this week about exponential growth versus linear growth, because lay people like me have to understand the difference, I think, between the two and the RO factor. And it's interesting that it's, you said about 1.3, 1.4 right about now, right? Our best understanding of it is around there? In UK. We're
in the UK
right now. Yeah, okay. Right now in Ottawa. Like right now in the Ottawa, as far as we know, we're almost dominant. We have very little UK variant in, and we were, up around 1.2. Well, around after the holidays, we were 1.2, 1.3. We went through this very rapid growth, and then we put in lockdown, and then since then we've been going down, and I think we're about 0.95, so we're below 1 right now, and that's below 1, and that's why we're decreasing.
The New York Times explained this in one kind of like an FAQ column that it had last year when all of this was first starting, and it used an estimated R of 1.3, and it wrote this. Say 1,000 people have a seasonal flu whose R is estimated at 1.3. They would be expected to infect 1,300 people. 1,000 people would infect 1,300 people. The second generation would go on to infect another 1,690 people. That can add up, and by the 10th generation, about 30 days' time, 42,621 people would have caught the flu. Wow.
Yeah, it's before this pandemic, thinking that I've been spending so much time with logarithmic graphs with people, general public looking at logarithmic graphs and exponential graphs, I would have, laughed. Right. But it's very difficult to get your head around. But this is some of the reasons why we sort of, more and more think is lower is better, because, a 10% increase on one case is 1. A 10% increase in 1,000 cases is 100. And, so that, 100 additional cases, like we're getting, if we're at our 1.1 right now, we're adding on hundreds of new cases a day, and that's contact tracing and 100 more people that can affect people. So the exponential really plays effect, and why earlier is kind of better and lower is kind of better.
Okay. So what is known or what's been published about the efficacy of vaccines given these variants?
More information coming out all the time. This week there's maybe some concern about the South African variant and the vaccines, but generally good news. Unfolding still, but good news for the UK variant. And I was really interested to see yesterday, all the vaccine companies are starting to respond by talking about boosters and second shots and things like that. I think we're going to need to, COVID's going to be with us now for years to come, and we're going to be adjusting our vaccines at some point. Whether it's going to be sooner than later is a good question. I think most of us are hopeful that it's going to be later. Like, we're going to be able to get people vaccinated with these current vaccines that are out. They're going to be effective. We're going to be able to open up society and then keep after the variants. I think that's the hope right now, or expectation. But I think the starting point too is that we've got a couple of vaccines that are just out the ballpark good, like 90 to 95% effectiveness. That's just amazing. So, we could have some erosion of effectiveness, and we still have a really good vaccine.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we just need some supply. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not good if you don't have it in your arm.
No. Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Always good. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
You too. My pleasure.
Dr. Doug Manuel, Professor Epidemiology, University of Ottawa, member Ontario's Science Advisory Table. It is the Friday Free for All Talkback Hour. After the news, 750-1310. Have a line for you on City News.
AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 101.1 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, January 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 19, feels like minus 30. Smith Falls, Minus 18, feeling like minus 27. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We have an update from Ottawa Public Health on mask wearing. With kids going back to school in both elementary and secondary starting on Monday in most of the region, Ottawa Public Health says a 3-layer mask would be the best defense against COVID spread. This would be made up of 2 layers of tightly woven fabric on the inside and outside, with a middle layer acting as an added line of defense. Now, OPH says contrary to what you may see, especially in the cold weather like today, things like scarves, balaclavas, and neck warmers are no substitute for a mask. City News Time 10:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas should have a fair amount of sunshine today. Some may have some lingering cloud. It's a cold day. Our high minus 11. That's it. It'll feel colder with the wind. Tonight, mainly clear. Minus 20 will feel like minus 30, and plenty of sunshine for the weekend. Minus 12 Saturday, minus 10 on Sunday. For today, the high minus 11.
And right now in Ottawa, as mentioned, minus 19, feeling like minus 30. And in Smiths Falls, minus 18, it feels like minus 27. The economy grew in November, the latest stats released by Stats Canada. It grew by 0.7% that month.
November's gain was the 7th straight month of increases after steep drops in March and April. It also comes with the backdrop of positive news about vaccines. Statistics Canada says its preliminary estimate for December shows growth of 0.3%, even as much of the country headed into heavy restrictions to slow the spread of COVID-19. The preliminary estimate for the fourth quarter shows an annualized growth rate of 7.8%. Don Kelly, The Canadian Press.
City News Time 10:03. A 38-year-old Carleton Place man facing charges of extortion and sexual assault. A Rideau Lakes OPP member was contacted back in October with a sex assault allegation. After the investigation, Michael Elliott of Carleton Place was charged with those crimes, and he does remain in custody. Now, police believe there could be other victims or similar incidents involving other people. If you have information, you're asked to contact police. Charges have been laid in connection with the shooting in Centertown last year. It was on December 5th. Ottawa police responded to a shooting on Nepean Street between Bank and Kent. It left a 52-year-old man injured. Today, the Guns and Gangs unit charged 25-year-old Mustafa Youssef of Ottawa with 10 offenses. This includes aggravated assault, careless use of a firearm, and possession of a restricted firearm. Youssef is due in court today. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
It's the Friday free-for-all, so it's wide open on topics. Just about anything goes, just about. You pick the topics. We just try to follow along and follow your lead. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310, or The Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. The Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. Vaccines. Who do you blame? Who do you blame for where we are right now? Some people are blaming Doug Ford. I'm blaming Justin Trudeau. Some people say, don't blame either of them. It's Pfizer's fault. Pfizer's retooling the plant. We wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for Pfizer. Okay, let's put that claim to the test as we make our way through the hour. But vaccines, to me, it was the biggest story to start the week. It's still the biggest story. And with each passing day, the Prime Minister's credibility slips just a little bit more. 750-1310. David Aiken got the party started yesterday with his tweet, shining a light on another Trudeau problem. David, longtime parliamentary correspondent, now with Global News. 4 million doses, right? How many times has the Prime Minister said that in recent weeks? 4 million doses. The Prime Minister's been talking up that number at every opportunity. 4 million doses. We're still going to get 4 million doses. Well, maybe not. Could be 4 million, could be 3.5 million. Quote from Global News this morning. Already, vaccine shipments over the coming weeks have been reduced as Pfizer deals with troubles at its Belgium plant. Canada is expected to receive 149,000 doses over the next 2 weeks, 1/5 of what had been previously promised, according to Major General Danny Fortin, who's in charge of the country's vaccine efforts. He is also in charge, you may be getting wise to this, it's the Major General. Fortin, he's also in charge of being the bearer of bad news. You notice Mr. Trudeau's never around when there's bad news to deliver? The events that are conspiring are not working in our favor, ladies and gentlemen. Big picture. If you go big picture, okay, and you take a look at this from 10,000 feet up, vaccine supply running dry was one of the headlines this week. Isn't that great? Running dry. So if fewer doses of vaccine, we have new and more contagious strains of a novel coronavirus in our communities. We have this whole issue of vaccine nationalism, vaccine protectionism. That was thrown in the mix this week for good measure, given the situation and the frustration in the EU. The prospect of export controls. And now we have this added, I don't know, what do you call it? Hiccup. Let's go with that term. Pfizer saying we should try and get six doses out of a vial. Hey, can you believe that, David? They did that this week. Have you tried getting 6 doses out of it instead of 5? Maybe try that. So that has sent health officials on this treasure hunt again. Because you need a special kind of syringe for that kind of thing. I mean, it's like an episode of The Gong Show at times. 750-1310, 750-1310. I would say if you read one column today, recommended reading, Licia Corbella, Calgary Herald. So many good points raised in this column. If you think about everything we've learned in, say, the last, 6 weeks, 2 months or so, about the Canadian situation with vaccines, beginning to end, okay, from research and development to domestic capacity and domestic production, one would hope eventually. For example, we learned, thanks to reporting in the Globe and Mail, that there is a facility in Montreal. It's owned by a company called Nuvax in Montreal. It's right next door on the same darn street in Montreal as the National Research Council. And this company, Nuvax, it has told the media now, could have been ready to go, could have produced a vaccine in this country with a rather modest government investment. But the Trudeau government didn't do that. And this was at a time when, remember, the Trudeau government couldn't spend money fast enough. I mean, it was day after day after day. Mr. Trudeau, Rideau Cottage, billions for this, billions for that, billions for this, billions for that. So that's one thing that we've learned. Instead, they picked the National Research Council facility in Montreal on the same street as Nuvax, and they're pouring more than $100 million into that place, and it's, a year behind schedule now, because it's a government project. Then we have, and I did some follow-up on this morning, just took a couple of clicks. We had Paul Lucas, former CEO, GlaxoSmithKline Canada. That's a job that he had for 16 years. So this guy knows pharma in Canada. He was the CEO of a major Canadian company for 16 years. And he wrote in the Financial Post that contrary to what the Trudeau government has been spinning, and the spin has been, we have no domestic capability to produce vaccines. We used to, but Harper killed it. That is so untrue. He wrote, GlaxoSmithKline Canada has a facility. It's running today in Canada, making most of the country's vaccine for seasonal flu. It's in Saint-Foy, Quebec. It's actually, maybe the government doesn't have internet access. I don't know. This is actually right from GlaxoSmithKline Canada's website. Quote, I'm going to quote, okay? We have 2 manufacturing facilities. The Mississauga manufacturing site produces approximately 50 different products, exporting to more than 100 markets worldwide. And in Saint-Foy, Quebec, we have a vaccine manufacturing site. It currently produces a majority share of Canada's seasonal influenza vaccine and is, quote, responsible for the domestic supply of the country's pandemic influenza vaccine requirements. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Wouldn't you think that, I'm just thinking out loud here, don't you think that that's something that the innovation minister would be aware of? Where's the innovation minister now? Oh, yes, he's spending more time with his family. Or maybe the health minister would be aware of what GlaxoSmithKline Canada does at a vaccine manufacturing plant in Saint-Foy, Quebec. Or maybe the public safety minister or something like that at Saint-Foy, Quebec. Or maybe, how about this? Maybe a prime minister would even want to inquire about a major vaccine manufacturing center in Saint-Foy, Quebec. But instead of leveraging that facility, or even, how about this, ordering that company, GlaxoSmithKline Canada, pivot, right? Like they do in the United States, order the company. In the United States, they have the Defense Production Act. No, we order you to do this. Why didn't the government order Saint-Foy, Quebec to stop making influenza vaccine and instead make COVID-19 vaccine? What did it do instead? It did this, it perpetrated a 3-month charade on the Canadian people, which we now have learned, thanks to the reporting from Charlie Pinkerton and iPolitics, who was on our program this week. We now know that was doomed after 3 days. And yet the government kept up this facade, this so-called partnership with this Chinese company called CanSino. All of this we know because of reporting, not because of anything Mr. Trudeau has said. Not because Mr. Trudeau has admitted to any of this, but because of journalism. And I would call it whistleblowing by people in the industry. People who actually know the industry, know what's going on, and clearly at this stage of the game, they don't like what they see. And one of those is Brad Sorensen. I'm going to tell you all about him next, here on the Rob Snow Show. Talk Back Hour. See, this is how it works, ladies and gentlemen. You don't care about these issues? Then I'm going to talk because I darn well care about them. 750-1310. Back after this on City News.
The Rob Snow Show, brought to you.
The Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Well, thank goodness there are people like Brad Sorensen is telling things like it is. We'd never know what was going on with the government vaccine plan. He's the CEO of a Calgary company called Providence Therapeutics, and man, oh man, did this land in the media this week because he has a story to tell about his company and its work on mRNA, the messenger RNA technology. That's the same technology as Pfizer, as Moderna. And it's been around for a while. And this company, Providence, was researching its possibilities as a cancer therapy. And then the world changed, right? Coronavirus pandemic. And the company thought this mRNA technology, maybe this could make a promising vaccine candidate. So in Alicia Corbella's column today in the Calgary Herald, she writes about Sorensen's attempts to get funding from the Canadian government, which the Canadian government said it was looking for. It was looking for companies who know about vaccines, cutting-edge technology, science. The Trudeau government, they love scientists, right? They wanted to accelerate research. Here you have a Calgary company, and it thinks, hey, maybe we could get our mRNA technology into a clinical trial. And you know what? It's all he can do to get a pinhead in the Trudeau government on the phone, or to answer an email, or even acknowledge that an application for funding had been received. And if this vaccine was ever produced, it would be produced in Calgary, not in Belgium. And instead, here we are, late January, following year, the entire province of Alberta is pretty much out of vaccine. And the CanSino vaccine never left the Beijing airport, for crying out loud. A little bit from this column, all about what it was like for these researchers at this company to deal with the Trudeau government on vaccine development. And look, as we go through this together, I want you to remember how many times this silly, this juvenile, this most unserious government that we have here in Ottawa, how many times has it talked about science? Right? That you can't question science, and we must believe the scientists, and we must have a chief scientific officer, and we must have science superclusters, and you remember the governor general and how much she loves science? All of this stuff, right? Wouldn't you love to give them all a wedgie right about now? Okay, maybe a noogie, just like, give me that head of hair, Trudeau. From the Calgary Herald this morning. The CEO of Calgary-based biotechnology firm says if he had been able to procure $35 million from the federal government instead of just $4.7 million, it would be in stage 3 clinical trials by now with a Canadian vaccine similar to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Brad Sorensen, founder and CEO of Providence Therapeutics, which has offices in Calgary and Toronto, announced on Tuesday that Providence had begun a phase 1 trial of its mRNA vaccine. It plans to produce it in Calgary with a Calgary company named Northern RNA. Now listen to this. After reaching out to the federal government in early March, Sorensen says he and his senior staff first met with Health Canada's Biologic and Radiopharmaceutical Drug Directorate on March 24th, told they would get a response in a couple of weeks. He then goes on, we kept getting told something was going to happen. We're waiting for this task force to be assembled. There was bureaucracy, lots and lots of red tape. This is all in March of last year. We were asked to submit a proposal. We submitted a proposal. We were told there was going to be a deadline. 1 month later, they would extend the deadline, not make a decision. It was almost 5 months later, August 17th, the day before Prime Minister Trudeau prorogued Parliament to stop a probe into the We Charity scandal before Sorensen was told they would get some funding, not the $35 million asked for, just $4.7 million. And then it took until October, 7 months later, for the money to actually show up in the bank account of the company. Operation Warp Speed, this was not. Meanwhile, Sorensen points out, Moderna received $1 billion from the U.S. government. Quote, we're no longer 2 months behind Moderna. We're 1 year behind. If we had $1 billion, we would have finished at the same time as Moderna, says Sorensen. But we never asked for $1 billion. We asked for $35 million. Had we gotten that, we'd be starting phase 3 trials right now. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? We do have vaccine manufacturing in this country. It's right outside of Quebec City. We did have cutting-edge researchers working on this very technology right here in Canada. It's in Calgary. And instead, here we are, waiting for vaccine shipments from Belgium, for crying out loud, from companies that aren't even headquartered here. John, good morning, John.
Good morning.
Yeah. What's on your mind, John?
Well, I'm wondering, you mentioned SNC-Lavalin and
Oh, yeah. $150 million for mobile health units. Have you seen any of these mysterious mobile health units?
No, but I know there was a company in Hamilton that was manufacturing them, and apparently they were quite wonderful. They could be delivered on a transport truck, and they could be linked together, and form even ICU units. Just link them together and
right. Okay.
Get anything you want. But anyways, that's not what I was wondering. I'm pretty sure I heard you talk to the mayor of Ottawa yesterday.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And maybe you had discussed it previously, but I'm wondering why, if not, why you didn't ask him how come Ottawa has a $663 million contract with SNC-Lavalin to build the Trillium line.
Well, we've been up to one side of that and down the other, sir. So.
And why worry about $150 million?
Well, yeah, I understand that. Now, why I didn't ask him? Why didn't I ask him that? I didn't think of asking him that. First of all, if you think I should have raised it, well, that's all well and good, but.
Okay.
My time is limited with the mayor. I had 10 minutes, and I had 5 or 6 things that I wanted to put to him. So.
Answered. New question.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a question. The WHO team of virologists that has been quarantined in Singapore traveled to Wuhan yesterday to start interviewing to find out maybe exactly how it
all came to be, right? Sure. But will they really get to the truth, I guess?
No, I don't think so, because the leader of the team is actually the guy who subcontracted the gain of function to Xi Zhengli at the Wuhan lab.
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about that, but
well, that's
I guess if I was an investigator and I was going to go to a big city in China and investigate something as an independent third party, I'd just be deeply suspicious about what I was being told anyway, right, by any government official in that country. And increasingly, I'm increasingly, thank you, John, we got to go, the news is coming out. I'm increasingly suspicious of anything anyone in government says in this country, for crying out loud. It's 10:28 on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow.
And the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, January 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, minus 17, but feeling in the high minus 20s in this wind. Here's what's making news this hour. The province has released the latest numbers on COVID infections today. 1,837 more cases and 58 more deaths from COVID-19 in Ontario. Ottawa had 53 more cases, the Eastern Ontario Health Unit with 8, Leeds, Grenville, Lanark had 4, and for the first time in 4 days, there were new cases in Renfrew County, 2. As for provincial hotspots, 595 cases in Toronto, 295 in Peel, 170 in York Region. The figures come from about 69,000 completed tests. The forecast, the UK variant of COVID-19 will be the dominant strain in parts of Canada by March, prompting new federal travel restrictions. The Prime Minister expected to announce anyone returning from abroad will have to quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel. That would be at their own expense. We'll have more on this with our Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney coming up at 11 o'clock. Stats Canada reporting the economy grew for a 7th month in a row in November, a gain of 0.7%. It came against a backdrop of positive news about vaccines. The preliminary estimate suggests growth will be 0.3% in December, 7.8% then for the fourth quarter, and for all of last year, 5.1%. City News Time, 10:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Now listen to this. This is an update from Bloomberg News. 9:57 a.m. New York time, which is the same as Ottawa time. So about half an hour ago. Vaccine nationalism, right? Big story this week. Vaccine nationalism. What's the EU going to do? Listen to this. Bloomberg reports. Quoting here. The European Commission will oblige drug companies such as Pfizer and AstraZeneca to obtain prior authorization before sending shots manufactured in the bloc to other countries. The new rules, which will run until the end of March, will allow EU states to block exports if a set of predefined criteria haven't been met, although officials were eager to point out that the move stopped short of blanket bans. The main condition will be that companies have already delivered a sufficient number of doses to EU members, as set out in existing purchase agreements. Still, the step represents a dramatic escalation, quote, a dramatic escalation in the global battle for vaccines, with thousands dying every day and the European economy struggling under lockdown measures that have lasted almost a year. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a major development in that story. Okay, phones 750-1310 Talkback Hour. Now, didn't Mr. Trudeau say this week, nothing to worry about? Nothing to worry about? Well, kind of worried right now. Sharon, thank you for calling, Sharon.
Hi, Rob. Well, thank you for covering this story, because this is the main story that we have. I agree with Pierre Bourque that the whole thing about the Governor General, I mean, who cares? Trudeau could have addressed that problem long ago. He should have. He's just using it for cover like he does everything else. And, of course, so many of the news agencies jump on it and leave, to oblige him and leave the most critical issue alone. It's really amazing that at this point, there's so many people, like I watched a CBC panel last night, Bear for Punishment, that some of the people, trying to cover up for Trudeau. Everybody's got a problem. People aren't really stressed about the vaccine. Well, excuse me? The people who have family members dying or going to die, we're all stressing about it. So so much of the media still wants to cover for this idiot prime minister that we have. And we've got to keep the pressure on this, because this is really crucial. When you just read about, the EU, I don't doubt they're going to hold up vaccines. I mean, there's going to be protectionist policies all over, which is why we should have been producing them here.
Yeah. So
is there an opportunity here, for Mr. Sorensen's company? I mean, they're way behind now, but all this stuff has to filter through Trudeau and Health Canada. We can't believe a word they say. I wouldn't trust them to give me directions to the corner store. Is there an opportunity here? No, I'm serious.
I might borrow that one sometime, Sharon. I've never heard that one before.
And, is there an opportunity here for the likes of, Jason Kenney, Scott Moe, Doug Ford, to grab the bull by the horns and do something themselves? Step all over Health Canada. Get in touch with Sorensen. Give them money. Do something to try and break this problem that we've got, to show that somebody is willing to think outside the box and do something. And if I hear one more time, I mean, Doug Ford is trying to be politically correct. It isn't really in his persona, so he shouldn't be doing it. I'm not blaming the Prime Minister. He's working as hard as... No, I'm sick of hearing that. He is not. He doesn't care.
Okay.
So we have to find another way around this problem, Rob, or we're going to be in this situation for another couple of years, and more of our loved ones are going to die, and that rests on Trudeau's head.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Okay. Thank you for your call. I'm just going to go back to this Corbella column. I read it 2 or 3 times. So good this morning. And she's so right on the money when she makes this point. When you think about the excuses that were offered up by the Trudeau government over the We Charity affair. One, and the big one, was, well, we wanted to help people so badly that we thought it was better to be fast than to be right. Right? Right? That's what they said at the time. We knew we had to act fast. And yeah, mistakes were made along the way, but hey, our intentions were pure, right? And that's allegedly why they were willing to have the We Charity run a government grant program with a budget of almost $1 billion that paid students to volunteer, which, by the way, is not volunteering. We call that a job. When you're paid to do something, it's called a job. It's not called volunteering. Anyway, you remember the We Charity got all of its money up front. It was something like more than $30 million, if my memory is correct. All of it paid up front within weeks. And Corbella doesn't mention this in her column, but it's along the same line. This report in the media about all the money that went to high school students, CERB payments of $2,000 a month to 15-year-old kids, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, more than $600 million. Well, can you imagine what a company like Providence Therapeutics could have done with $635 million to advance its vaccine research? Instead, we're giving it to 15-year-olds. Here we have a biotech company on the cutting edge of scientific research, and it waits 7 months and gets a measly $4 million from the Trudeau government. which has done nothing but spin through a dizzying array of nonsense for months on end. Chris, Blackburn Hamlet, go ahead, sir.
Hey, Rob.
Yes, sir.
I believe Mr. Trudeau can sleep very well knowing he will be reelected again. You did a poll about a week ago for your listeners, and most of the listeners that I heard said that they believe he will be reelected.
Yep. That was this week. Yeah, we did that this week. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and that's the main problem here is that he can pretty well do what he wants, knowing that he's going to get reelected. Lowell was just speaking to you an hour ago and saying how harshly Mr. O'Toole was treated by the CBC commentator. I'm not too impressed with Mr. O'Toole's actions lately, but still, he was going to get harsh treatment from the CBC regardless of whatever he does, because he's conservative. So it's one of those situations where we can't really win, because whatever he does, nothing seems to stick to him.
Right.
If there's a next federal election, it'll likely be in the fall, maybe, or even next spring.
Well, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I know Mr. Trudeau. Mr. Trudeau says he doesn't want an election, but every now and then there's a report that says all they're doing is getting ready for the election. All the Liberals behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, it's and they're getting ready. They have their plan is to what they usually do is whenever the election is called, it's Liberals with their friends in the media will flip this channel and make it all about climate change and racial discrimination, all those hot button issues, and get people's minds off vaccinations. That's their action plan, and it works. So why not do it?
I don't know. It's going to be, you know what? It's going to be hard to change the channel away from the pandemic and vaccines.
I wouldn't put it past them, and I wouldn't put it past the majority of people, especially those who live in the GTA region. They seem to be on a different channel than we are.
Okay. All right, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of that going around. No doubt about it. I don't know. Maybe that says more about us, Chris. They think we're the weirdos. Barry. Good morning, Barry.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, Barry. What's up?
Yes, I think it's evident that with the what's happened with the Governor General, Trudeau's lack of vetting on the Governor General, that all the processes we have in government to vet people or make sure that they're qualified people, I think we should have a vetting process for the Prime Minister, so that when
we do, it's called an election.
Well, no, it should go farther than election, Rob. I think.
Okay.
I think once a party has won the election and they've already decided, say, Trudeau is going to be our Prime Minister if we win the election. Okay, once they win the election, there should still be further vetting to make sure that the Prime Minister has a brain and that he knows how to use it.
Okay, but what if we have the election, he wins the election, and then we discover he doesn't have a brain? Then what are we supposed to do?
Well, then try somebody else, and if they fail too many times, like a baseball game.
Barry, maybe we'll put a conservative brain in there. What do you think?
Well, you never know.
Transplant, Barry. Okay, thank you. Okay. Colleen in Greeley. Good morning, Colleen.
Good morning, Rob. Yes. I've called you. I've listened to you for years.
Oh, thank you.
I don't call very often. You're my lifeline to sanity.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, believe it or not, I'm totally upset again.
I'm sorry to do that.
Trudeau, he's incompetent. Our government is incompetent, and we as Canadians have to take some of the responsibility. We damn well voted for him, not me particularly, but he was voted in. Mm-hmm. And other parties like the NDP party have supported him in the Bloc. The Conservatives themselves have to take some responsibility in opposition. I think that any party at this time during a pandemic that would think more about calling an election after they took a pay raise in March, all the politicians did, prorogued Parliament, and then now, it's just unfathomable, Rob. Our democracy's been taken away from us. As far as I'm concerned, all Trudeau cares about is image. and causes his agenda. And ordinary Canadians, the guys in the oil fields, the people on the front line, I don't think he gives a damn.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's my personal opinion.
You feel better now?
And you asked yesterday, you talked about why the Tories wouldn't, like, why O'Toole?
Why isn't he catching on? Yeah.
Well, when you go to be elected as leader and you say you're blue true,
True blue, yeah.
and that true blue or whatever, which I didn't vote for him as number one, actually.
Okay.
And then when you come out and you start all these policies that are more like liberal and New Democratic.
Yeah, more. Well, he would say moderate. He would say moderate. He would say more moderate.
Yeah,
right?
but are we ever going to have any leaders that truly lead? They say what they believe, even if they don't get elected.
Yeah, but you know, you have to think, conservatives, they do this all the time when there's a leadership.
Yeah.
Right? They run to the right because they're trying to get the most conservative votes, right?
Yeah, but I'm tired of being used
so
like
they're
that.
I know. So they're reaching out to, for example, they're reaching out to people who own firearms. They're reaching out to dairy farmers. They're reaching out to the pro-lifers and evangelical Christians and these kinds of things, because the thing is, you want to win. You want to win.
Oh, I get that,
and you want to win the conservative leadership.
At what cost?
Yeah. Patrick Brown did the same thing. Patrick Brown did the same thing. Doug Ford did the same thing.
Look at Harper. Harper got elected, and I think he was a great prime minister personally.
Yeah.
And what happened? He didn't even do half the things we wanted him to do.
No.
And then what happened when Trudeau got elected? He turned around and got rid of most of it. Some really good things.
Okay, Colleen. Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. Feel better, Colleen. Feel better. Hang in there, okay?
Canadians need to take responsibility too and start speaking up.
Thank you. Okay, in Greeley. Dave, Taz, hang on the line. Get to you next. 750-1310 Talk Back Hour. Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob.
No Nut Butter is a business where we make allergy-friendly spreads, so alternatives to peanut butter, Nutella, or those kind of things that kids and adults like to have on toast or on a banana or on an apple, and aren't really available to people with severe food allergies or allergies to the top allergens. When you're an allergy parent, you read every label because you need to know the details of every ingredient that's in the products that you're going to feed your kid. So we found that a lot of the products that we were looking at had may contain warnings, which we can't have, and had just so many ingredients in them that you don't know if there's a weird unknown ingredient that is kind of disguised under a different name. So we started No Nut Butter so that we would have the opportunity to have products that were safe and free from the top allergens and had really simple ingredients in them so that you would know exactly what you were feeding your kids. We make 4 different products at No Nut Butter. So we make a pumpkin seed butter, which is our alternative to peanut butter. So it only has pumpkin seeds, roasted pumpkin seeds, and some kind of oil in it. So we usually use corn oil or olive oil. And then we make what we call Choco Pumpkin, and it is our alternative to a chocolate hazelnut spread. So it is our pumpkin seed butter with our chocolate spread, so very much chocolate hazelnut spread. We make a coconut caramel, so it is coconut milk and sugar, and it is our kind of vegan option for caramel, because typically caramel has lots of butter and dairy in it. And then we make an apple butter, which is apples and cinnamon and sugar, and that's it. We do also make a sugar-free pumpkin seed butter option because we have some diabetics and just some people who don't want sugar in their lives, and so we do offer that, but you'd have to custom order it. There are very strict rules around producing products, particularly nut-free products. You aren't allowed to cook in your own kitchen, which makes a lot of sense. If you have a dog, you don't want to cook in your own kitchen. But from a nut standpoint, it's just making sure that you have everything really clean and organized So we cook all of our products in a commercial kitchen so that we can keep all of those health and safety procedures really tight and together. My personal business started a company called Shop Local Ontario during the pandemic, so we were pretty well equipped to go forward into the pandemic in a world of e-commerce and transacting online. You can find us online at nonutbutter.com, or you can find us on Facebook, No Nut Butter, or on Instagram at No Nut Butter.
Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
The Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. That's my email address. Tony writes, this is a good one. Listen to this. Deaths to date in Canada, 19,664, according to Health Canada. First COVID death was a BC man, March 9th of 2020, according to Reuters. 326 days since the first death recorded. Total deaths per day since the first death is an average of 60.3 deaths per day. Let's call it 60, he says. So for every day we don't vaccinate, we potentially lose 60 people a day. Keep in mind, it takes 7 to 8 weeks to develop the antibodies to fight the virus. 3.5 million doses by the end of March, according to CBC, or 1.7 million Canadians add 8 weeks to get full immunity. Puts us at the end of May. Let's use the end of April, as people will be vaccinated, hopefully, along the way. Using today's date as a start, go to the end of April. That's 91 days. 91 days, 60 people die every day. Is 5,460 potential new deaths by the end of April. Much higher as the year progresses. And Justin is too busy appearing on the social. That's an email that makes you think, isn't it? Sure is. Dave. Good morning, Dave.
Yeah, one concern that I have is if the EU blocks the vaccine, which I'm sure they will, Trudeau has a ready-made excuse. Well, what can we do? There's nothing we can do about it. Mm-hmm. Because other countries like the UK are complaining about the same thing. We're not the only ones in this boat. There are other countries
complaining about
the lack of vaccine.
Lack of vaccine, sure. Yeah.
And that gives them a ready-made excuse. And the people of Canada just buy it.
Well, they buy it, yeah. Some of them buy it. I don't buy it.
People do because he's going to get voted back in.
Well, we'll have to wait and see for that, I suppose. But the fact is, what my point this morning is, look at the reporting, look at the work that's been done.
Oh, finally. I've been complaining about this the last 2 months.
And kind of like tie it all together. And you find out it's kind of like staring you right at the face. We could have done this here.
Well, yeah.
We could have done this here. We had every capability and every skill that any other country had to do this here.
I don't know what you, Professor, said that last summer that we could do it here, and he got very little sound bites.
Adaran, Professor Adaran.
By the way.
Sorry?
How did it become 4,000 by the end of March? Because I watched the question period on Wednesday, and they said 6,000, and then I watched Evan Sullivan.
Million, you mean.
6 million.
Yeah.
And then I watched Evan Sullivan on Wednesday night, and Anita Anand said it's going to be 6 million. We will have 6 million dosages by the end of March, and I think it was another 20 by the end of the second quarter. And then yesterday it became 4 million.
Well, by the end of business yesterday, it was down to 3.5, sir.
Yeah, I know. Right. I mean, it's
and it's not even noon yet, Dave. Who knows what the number will be at noon, right? So
we're not going to get any. We're going to get very little. That's no doubt about that. And what about Moderna? What happened to that? We don't hear anything about that at all.
Well, Moderna is going to the more remote and isolated areas of Canada, right? Because it doesn't need the same kind of cold chain.
Yeah, but how many are we supposed to get? That's the question, because back in January, we were supposed to get 125,000 a week.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we're getting dribs and drabs.
Yeah. Okay. Good points all. Thank you, Dave.
It's really sad.
Yeah, it is sad. It is sad. It is sad.
People of Canada have been saying this are so...
like he stands there and he says, well, don't worry, everything's by the end of March, by the end of March. Well, how many people are going to die between now and the end of March?
And
oh, sorry, Dave. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Taz. Good morning, Taz.
Yes, I think the problem is that there's Trudeau defers it to the province, and then you got the media, which I do think is part of the problem. They're saying Ford in March said we can all go on vacation. I was watching a global clip on YouTube, and it was just putting out on Ford, and Ford said this, Ford that. Well, what about Miss Tam with the mask? Now they're saying, and then what about Dr. Fauci, who says you don't have to shut it down unless you have good mask policy. And, Canadians seem to pick and choose what comes from the United States or what comes from the WHO or what comes from another country. So Canadians or the Liberals are very pick and choose. I think they're hypocrites. And, we have poker face for a prime minister. I mean, we have a clown, basically. I mean, somebody who has, I think, a serious personality disorder. And, you talk about venting. Why don't we vent people with a liberal mental disorder? I mean, I think that would,
Maybe we should vet the callers a little bit better, David. What do you think? Judith writes, The Rob Snow Show at ottawa.citynews.ca. Rob, I'm so sad that this federal government, led by Justin Trudeau and friends, it makes us look like fools. Canadians are creative. We make things from nothing. We care for fellow Canadians without asking. We have the will. We have the energy. We can't go global until we take care of our own house. This Liberal government is weighing us down. We can make this vaccine. We should be supporting these creators. I've had enough of Trudeau and his friends. What else? Who else is here? Who is this from? Howie. Yeah, okay. It irks me that Trudeau won't put money into our own country. The main ones are pipelines, PPE issues. We had Canadian companies offering to produce them when we would have a guaranteed supply with control over design and production, but instead we went to China. I love the show, but I find Rob cuts people off a bit too much. But I understand it's meant to pinpoint the objective. Also, David, you do an awesome job supporting Rob and the show.
I like to think so.
Peter, I totally blame Justin for the vaccine crisis we are in. What is most frustrating, though, is his continuance of insulting our intelligence by bragging of how many doses we would expect to receive later. Maybe he could understand the crisis we are in if we outline our current situation to him through an analogy. As a taxpayer, we pay our taxes to afford us protection of our lives and property from fire. So our house catches fire. We call the fire department only to be told by the fire chief, can't help you today. We'll send 5 trucks next week. You know what? That's pretty close. So what do we have coming up after the news here? Mike Eppel, our business correspondent out of Toronto from his perch on Bay Street in Toronto. He's watching the Reddit rebellion. What's the latest on the ticker there for GameStop today? GameStop is the stock of the week.
It's up.
Still up?
$333.
$333.94.
Pretty much gone. It's up 70% since open.
A month ago, it was $19 a share, this stock. 5 days ago, it was $96. It's done pretty well, hasn't it? It's quite incredible what's going on. The Reddit rebellion. We'll talk stocks after the news. We'll talk sports and Sens after the news with Steve Warne from the Steve Warne Project and the Sens Nation podcast, and wrap things up with Queen's Park Week in Review. The final hour of the Rob Snow Show is just ahead here on City News.
The Rob's
Winterlude across Canada. Watch the virtual show exploring Canada's winter traditions. Meet the carvers of Winterlude's first national ice carving competition. Vote online for your favorite sculpture. Celebrate Canada's artistic diversity with Fosia, Ariane Moffat, William Prince, Tracy Trash, Cornet, Ria May, and the incredible Eladj Balde. Join us February 5th at 7 p.m. This is Winterlude. Experience.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, January 29th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 17 degrees. It feels like minus 28. In Smiths Falls, minus 17. Feeling like minus 25. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa Public Health issuing a tweet this morning on mask wearing, saying a 3-layer mask would be your best defense against COVID spread. This is made up of 2 layers of tightly woven fabric and then a middle layer acting as an added line of defense. OPH says contrary to what you may see, especially walking around in this cold, things like scarves, balaclavas, neck warmers are no substitute for a mask. The province has released its latest numbers on COVID infection, 1,837 more cases today, 58 more deaths in Ontario. Ottawa has 53 more cases. The Eastern Ontario Health Unit has 8. Leeds, Grenville, Lanark with 4 new cases. And in Renfrew County, after 4 days of no new cases each day, there are 2 new cases today. As for provincial hotspots, 595 cases in Toronto, 295 in Peel, 170 in York. The figures come from about 69,000 completed tests. City News Time, 11:01. Be prepared to pay some big bucks if you're trying to get back into Canada after traveling abroad. New travel restrictions are being announced by the Prime Minister in a media briefing about a half an hour from now. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
For weeks, we've been hearing from the federal government that travel restrictions could be on the way, and it appears that day is finally here. The Prime Minister expected to announce new restrictions this morning. The National Post reporting that will include isolation hotels. Basically, anybody who flies into Canada would be forced to quarantine at their own expense in a monitored hotel. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh telling me moments ago he supports this move.
Australia has used it, as well as New Zealand. It has been effective in limiting the spread internationally of COVID-19. And we're seeing more and more evidence now that that is a real concern.
The premiers of Ontario and Quebec also pushing the feds to try and introduce mandatory testing for all arriving passengers. That would be on top of the mandatory tests they have to take 3 days before they board their flight. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Most areas should have a fair amount of sunshine today. Some may have some lingering cloud. It's a cold day. Our high minus 11. That's it. It'll feel colder with the wind. Tonight, mainly clear. Minus 20 will feel like minus 30, and plenty of sunshine for the weekend. Minus 12 Saturday, minus 10 on Sunday. For today, the high minus 11.
Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, minus 17 degrees, feeling in the mid-minus 20s, though, in the wind. Ottawa Police Service looking for your help as they try to find a suspect in a fraud and theft investigation. This person may have left the area, but 25-year-old Marc-Andre Levesque was a store manager in the east end of the city. He is wanted on theft and fraud charges. He was a store manager between August of 2018 and July of 2019. This man has no fixed address, is described as white with a husky build and a trimmed beard. He has brown eyes and wears glasses. Police believe he could have traveled east, could be in the Fredericton area, but anyone with information is asked to contact Ottawa Police. The Snowsuit Fund in the city has announced the Snow Angel Challenge. It will be held during the entire month of February. All donations going to provide snowsuits to less fortunate Ottawa children. The Snowsuit Fund invites people or groups, maybe schools, businesses, to create snow angels and share those images and videos to win prizes over the entire month. You can register your group at 2021 Snow Angel Challenge at the Snowsuit Fund of Ottawa, or just text SNOW to 45678 and donate $25 directly from your cell phone. Once again, this begins on Monday. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's crazy what's going on in this stock market this week. It's like the wild and crazy days of the dot-com boom back in 99. As I recall, I was doing a nightly business show on the radio back then. Ladies and gentlemen, that did not have a happy ending. Now it is the rise of the Reddit traders. It is the Reddit rebellion, and they're taking the market by storm, and it's causing a lot of grief for the billionaire hedge fund class. And doesn't everyone just want to shed a tear for the titans of Wall Street? It is GameStop mania again this morning, and to go over the very latest, Mike Eppel, you hear him every morning here on City News Ottawa, our business editor. He's in Toronto. Morning, Mike.
Good morning.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. It's wild to watch.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Right? Yeah, it is. Have you ever seen anything like this in all your years, Mike?
You know what? I think we have, but in much slower, at a much slower pace, but in equally as large of a dose, so to speak. Remember back when Nortel was going straight line higher, and the dot-com bubble era. And Bre-X was a thing that some people might recall. And, I'd go on every 15 minutes talking about how that was up by, 10% each and every half hour. It was again, we've seen these manias in the past. Each one has a different genesis. Most of them have the same outcome. So for everybody who's piling into GameStop, be careful, because you don't want to be the last person to buy at the high, only to see all of a sudden the Reddit posts turn against you, and they move on to something more interesting, I suppose, for lack of a better description.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, do they sell tulip bulbs at GameStop? Right. So
that's a good reference.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the tulip bulb mania of 1637, right? What makes this interesting, though, it really is kind of the rise of the retail trader, right? Isn't it, Mike? And
a much younger cohort.
Yeah.
I'd say this is something that sort of the old guard on Wall Street has been caught off guard by, because they're saying, Reddit, what's that? and the blog posts that you read on that social media platform, which I'd hazard a guess has seen all sorts of new subscribers just in the past little while. That's been what's been moving this. It hasn't been some sort of trade behind the scenes per se. It's been more of a revelation, maybe about what is going on within the market itself.
Yeah.
And I think the root of this is, of course, the pushback against hedge funds. And quite frankly, hedge funds, I don't want to sound like I'm a defender of them, but that's how it's going to come across. But they are, not only shorting stocks, betting against companies, but also bidding them up. There are two sides of every trade, but the ones that gain the most attention are when a hedge fund comes in, bets on a company to fail for all intents and purposes, and then goes on, the managers go on TV and explain why they're doing that, and it just causes, the market basically to turn against a company. Well, the backstory on this was hedge funds had kind of been ganging up against GameStop, which is a video game retailer. You look at it and you're kind of going, how is that not Blockbuster?
Yeah, it's like EB Games, right? It's like EB Games.
It's EB Games. Well, GameStop owns EB Games. So
there you go. Yeah.
But the shift, of course, has been to digital download. So why do you need a bricks and mortar retailer?
Right. So, and really, Mike, who's going to a brick and mortar retailer these days? A lot of these, like EB Games, they're in the super centers, they're in shopping malls, right? Are they even open, right? So.
Exactly, which raises questions about the fact that no one is trading these companies based on any type of fundamentals. Rather, it is all about, hey, let's go for $300 and $400 and just pushing it up.
Yeah.
And nothing that's particularly based in reality. Rather, in this case, the Reddit chat rooms, spurred on by Wall Street Bets, again, this is one of these things you learn about after the fact, was saying, hey, these hedge funds are trying to destroy GameStop. And again, the younger cohort is into video games, and they saw this as an affront and said, what if we start buying GameStop and so-called squeeze the shorts? That sounds painful on multiple levels because a short seller has to cover their losses if the stock goes up.
Yeah.
They're betting on it to go down.
And then you can get caught in the squeeze, and that just exacerbates the whole situation.
That's right. And the other thing that has come to the surface of all of this is that the short sellers were able to borrow actually against more stock than is actually in the open market.
Yeah, in the float.
So that's a regulatory fail.
Yeah.
Which brings, of course, the regulators into the mix here. What's going to be done going forward? Every time we see some sort of anomaly where we see massive swings, high or low, on the markets, you look back and go, what was missed? I mean, that was the case in the 08-09 financial crisis, and why, the movie The Big Short was all based on the fact that there was a runaway real estate market in the United States, and it was all based on leverage.
Yep.
Fast forward to now, what is this based on? Well, you've got the pandemic leading to a lot of day trading, these new platforms called Robinhood and zero commission trading accounts. And, there's been some question, well, people are getting stimulus checks, so they're putting that, young people are putting this into the market.
Yeah, well, if you can get a $600 stimulus check and turn it into $60,000, I mean.
Well, sure. Or you could lose it just as quickly. Let's not.
For sure, yeah.
It's not a sure thing. But you kind of go, okay, what's been the catalyst of all of this? And there's a whole bunch of things. Record low interest rates. You can't make money elsewhere, so you go and look at the stock market. So really what this has done is it has opened up a new age group of people who are much more in tune with the financial markets, but not maybe necessarily like the traders who have been in for years, where they look at a company's fundamentals. In this case, they're just saying, what's going up? Let's buy it. Let's head it up. And it's not just GameStop. It's AMC theaters.
Right. Like
industry,
exactly.
Okay?
Right. AMC theaters, like movie theaters, video game stores, Bed Bath and Beyond is another one, right?
I will say some of these companies have pretty good e-commerce. Bed Bath and Beyond turned things around last year, so there's a viable business model. BlackBerry, lots of software sales.
Yeah.
They're okay.
Yeah.
But they also are the favorites of short sellers. So once this kind of works itself through, then things will calm down. At the same time, yesterday, you had this massive outcry because Robinhood, this zero commission trading account, which has been the platform of choice among these day traders, shut things down.
Yeah.
Because they said, we're trying to protect traders from themselves, so to speak, but behind the scenes, how does a company that charges no commissions on a trade make money? Well, it's through moving the sale or the trading that comes in, the buys and the sells, to a so-called market maker.
Right, order flow.
Trade.
Yeah.
They had to cover it. It happens so fast now that you don't want to be holding something that's not worth what it was, and then do you have a margin call? And Robinhood had to get a $1 billion backstop from Citadel, which is ostensibly a hedge fund, ironically, an investment firm. So this is just another layer to this whole thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is pretty crazy, but I heard your report this morning. It's really interesting. It actually helped the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan because they had been losing all kinds of money in some shopping mall stock, but then it popped because of the Robinhood traders, so they sold it, right?
That's right. That's right. And that's the thing. We'll get you, Wall Street, for what you have done to us in the past, you fat cats. and what does it do? The CEO of BlackBerry is in line, if the stock holds up, for a $90 million payout or something like that.
That'll teach him.
Yeah, that'll fix him. BlackRock, Vanguard, and Fidelity are some of the world's largest investment companies. They own a huge piece of GameStop. Their values have gone up more than $5 billion.
Wow.
So
Wow.
On every trade, there's a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
And again, you wonder who's going to be left holding the bag when this thing comes to an end. When the music stops, you don't want to be the one looking for a chair.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's people are making a lot of money quickly, and they could lose it just as fast because they've never been in anything like this before, and it could turn south, or it could keep going. I have no idea.
No, none of us really do, right? Yeah. So, but it was interesting. I was on Twitter yesterday afternoon. I was watching a little bit of this on CNBC yesterday afternoon after the show was done. And trending in Canada yesterday, I've never seen this before, because Robinhood, I don't think you can do the Robinhood thing in Canada. I'm not sure because
you know what? You raised a really good question. Yeah. I'm not on the platform, so I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to check.
But what was trending? Wealthsimple and Questrade,
right?
Trending on Twitter, right? Because I think Canadian young retail traders are thinking, how do I get in on that?
And they were they were restricting trades as well. So Robinhood was called out, but it was all of them, right? Because they were all kind of in the same mix, and some of them are owned by big banks. And then the trading platforms now are pretty inexpensive anyway, regardless of what they are. It's this is interesting because it is a mania, and then you've got other players who are fueling it. Elon Musk is in there. This morning he just changed his Twitter handle to include Bitcoin, and Bitcoin went up 17%. So it's like, okay, I don't know. It's you look at a week where we've had Apple report a profit of $28 billion.
Yeah.
And massive sales expectations, and the share price is down 4% since then, because some of it is actually the short sellers having to cover their losses and selling some of the winners, and that would be Apple as one of them. Tesla has been a massive company this year. A lot of that's been fueled by Reddit. It doesn't make anywhere near the amount of money that could justify a $600 or $700 billion market value right now. Nevertheless, it's a favorite among bloggers, and they figure 10 to 20 years from now, Tesla's going to be a real thing. Right now it's a thing, but it's going to be even bigger. Yeah. That far in the future. Now, whether or not it lives up to that remains to be seen.
We'll see. Well, $330 for GameStop right now. We'll see where it is by noon. Thanks, Mike. Thanks again. Great stuff.
Well,
enjoy the show. Yep. Mike Eppel, our business anchor, he's in Toronto today. Steve Warne's here in Ottawa. He was an optimistic Sens fan last week. We'll check in and find out how he's feeling this week. Longtime sports broadcaster, Steve Warne Project, and the Sens Nation podcast. Rob Snow Show, City News.
Hi, Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online. And the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it love it.
City News, 101.1 FM.
And 1310 AM.
The Ottawa Senators have now played 8 games. They have won 1. It was the first game they played of this abbreviated season against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Should have had a parade. They have since lost 7, 6 in regulation, 1 in overtime. And at times it just has not looked pretty at all. Steve Warne is here. Steve Warne Project, Sensation Podcast. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
You were very forgiving last week when you were, be patient. They didn't have any exhibition games, okay? But, all right. Of course, it's good. They haven't played in 10 months, Rob. You're overreacting, okay? Am I still overreacting, Steve, or is this some of the ugliest Ottawa Senators hockey you've ever seen?
Well, I think the answer is yes on both counts. I think I'm finished now. As of this morning, I'm finished now with the excuse of the layoff.
Right.
10 months without the games, the exhibition games, half the roster turned over, lack of familiarity, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think, that 8 games, that kind of replicates what you would have had in an exhibition schedule. These have 6 or 7 exhibition games. And the play is more dysfunctional than I thought it would be, but I did expect it to be dysfunctional early on, individually, team-wise. But, I probably didn't think it would be this bad. All that said, though, I was looking at the stats. They have exactly the same record through 8 games that they did this time last season.
Oh, okay. All right. So if you're a Sens fan, your team is on pace for kind of a repeat of last season when they were second last in the entire league. To me, Steve, just being a fan, okay, not some kind of analyst or sports journalist or anything like that. But
hate those guys.
I just can't figure out the identity of this team. Is it a young team? Is it an old, slow team? They're not hard to play against. They're not tough. They're not mean. They're not heavy. So you hear that sometimes. Oh, it's a big, heavy team, hard to play against. They're none of that. They're really bad defensively, and now there are all kinds of questions about the goaltending. I don't know what the identity of this team is. It's I feel like I was misled. I wanted young, exciting, fast, and I was misled, Steve. Do I have a legitimate gripe? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think anybody that is a fan of a team that starts this way, you always have a legitimate gripe. I think it's still early in that regard as to identity and what they will be. I think your hope of them being young, fast, and skilled, I think, very soon you're going to start seeing more of that. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they start experimenting with bringing some of the guys up from Belleville. It just seems astonishing to me that someone like Eric Brandstrom, with all the skill he has, even if he still, as a kid, has warts on his game, surely he'd be an upgrade on some of the guys they're trucking out there right now. So, I understand the frustration that everybody has right now. But I do think that, and even last night, I thought that was a decent effort. But Matt Murray just was not up to snuff in that game. I thought there were some really leaky goals that were extremely deflating for the club. So, like I say, they're 8 games in, and I feel like you're going to start seeing glimmers of hope, a little more consistency, gradual improvements. and hopefully for Sens fans some more victories too.
Well, I don't know, Steve, man, they're on pace for 7 wins, like, for the entire season. Holy smokes.
I mean, the numbers across the board, the math is bad right now for sure. Maybe this time next week I'll have a different take on things, but there's some bright, there's some hope ahead. You've got the Oilers for 4 of their next 6 games, and Edmonton is trying to figure their world out as well. They have 2 of the best players on the planet, and yet they're off to a 3-6 start. The Canucks, though, having said that, the Canucks were off to a bad start, and the Sens were just the remedy for them. Exactly. So maybe they get a bee's nest in the Oilers. I don't know.
Yeah, just what the doctor ordered for the Canucks, right? So couldn't have come at a better time. Let me ask you. I mean, it's 1-7 of the first 8 games. I mean, are jobs on the line? Front office jobs, coaching jobs, Steve? If this is the trend. Do you think?
100%. You have
really? Yeah.
Well, I think ideally, I mean, in most organizations, there'd be some level of patience, but you always have to be cognizant of the fact that the Ottawa Senators have, and I don't think I'm stepping out on this in any way, shape, or form, they have the NHL's most volatile owner.
Oh, yeah.
And he's, at his heart, he is a massive hockey fan, and so I think, whatever you want to say about Eugene Melnyk, he is that. And he is a fan, and we know how fans are reacting right now, the way you're reacting right now. You want accountability. You want wins. And because of that level of volatility and emotion that I think Eugene Melnyk is probably feeling right now, because he was talking a pretty good game about the future of this club, and it's been a really rough start.
Yep.
And so, I think that anything's on the table. But I think, you're still at least a month more of this away from, wholesale changes. But like I say, with this owner, I never say never.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to lose and have a record like this, one of the jokes that was going around Twitter this morning was, hey, when does all the talk begin on who the Sens might get in the next draft, right? So let's start talking about, when do we start doing that in a 56-game regular season, talking about draft lotteries and draft picks and everything else. But, if you're going to lose this often and this poorly, where is Branston? Where's like Formanton and all of these prospects that you've talked up so wildly? Why are you playing some of these people? It's like they're boring to watch. They're slow. They're not very good. And Eugene Melnyk, you talk about Eugene Melnyk. He had this plan on the business side of things. Hey, let's try and get 6,000 fans in the stands, right? My gosh, you keep playing like this, you'd be lucky to get 6,000 fans in the stands, even if without a pandemic, for crying out loud.
I understand your rage at this stage of the game completely. I do think they've kicked off the rust now. There are no more excuses. I think you'll see more consistency moving forward. It's not going to be this bad moving forward. But while you're living in it, it really, as an emotional fan, it's hard not to be disgusted by everything right now. And I think you put your finger on the very big thing that most fans are upset about. Nobody expected a big year. Nobody expected a playoff year. What they expected was, a step forward in improvements. I still think that could come.
Okay.
But while you're living in this 8-game stretch and you're watching some of these veteran guys, it's frustrating for sure, because you want to see the kids. And right now the veterans, they aren't providing the insulation. In fact, some of the veterans are the biggest issues with this club right now. And if there's 2 guys I'm to point out right now on the veteran front, are 2 guys who aren't going anywhere. And that's Matt Murray, who hasn't played very well since opening night, and Yevgeny Dadonov. These are 2 guys that are, they're not going to be gone at the trade deadline. They're not on short-term deals. They're here for a while, and they're expected to be part of this core, and they've absolutely got to be better. Murray's let in leaky goals. Dadonov has a goal and an assist in the 8 games so far, and both of those, if you look at the highlights, were totally lucky. So those guys have got to be better. But in the meantime, these veterans who are here on short terms, they're supposed to be mentors, and I think they are that. But they've got to be better in the meantime. It's one thing to have veteran insulation for your kids, but they've also got to be quality hockey players when games are on, too.
Okay. It's a pretty dry weekend for sports, right? There's no Sens, there's no football, Steve. What are we going to do?
Netflix?
Netflix, I guess so.
You got any Netflix recommendations for me?
Well, I don't, but my girlfriend says Bridgerton. Bridgerton. You saw it?
Yeah, they just re-upped for a second season.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I haven't watched it, so I'm out of ideas, Steve. All right, we got to run. Thanks, Steve. We'll talk next week. Hopefully things are improved and my mood is better as a Sens fan.
I'm telling you it will be.
All right, thanks, man. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.
Steve Warne of the Steve Warne Project and the Sens Nation podcast, available on all your podcasting platforms. The news is coming up, and then it's Queen's Park Week in Review. My goodness, don't miss it. It's going to be hot, hot, hot. This is City News.
While others try to spin it, City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, January 29th. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buchan. Right now in Ottawa, sunshine minus 16 and a wind chill of minus 25. In Smiths Falls, that same wind chill, minus 25 under sunny skies and minus 16. Here's what's making news this hour. 1,837 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario, 58 new deaths in today's report. Public Health Ontario reporting 53 new cases in Ottawa. The health unit confirmed 81 yesterday. Elsewhere locally, 8 new cases for Eastern Ontario, 4 for Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 2 new cases for Renfrew County. The numbers out of just over 69,000 tests. Expectation is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is going to announce stricter restrictions on travelers responding to new, more likely contagious variants of novel coronavirus. That includes making it mandatory for travelers to quarantine in a hotel at their own expense when they arrive in the country. Reports citing officials who spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity, not authorized to speak ahead of today's planned announcement, which will get underway in minutes. Trudeau has said such measures could be imposed suddenly and bluntly warned against non-essential trips abroad. A second official said the reason for the new measures is concern over the new variants of the virus. Over 1,000 big box stores and other businesses deemed essential have been visited by provincial COVID-19 compliance officers so far this month. Last weekend's inspections took place in Ottawa and other locations. 700 workplaces visited. Inspectors found 41% of them had at least one issue of non-compliance. 98 tickets were issued. So far this year, 112 tickets have been issued to businesses and individuals during 3 inspection campaigns. Most common reasons for noncompliance are failure to properly screen staff and patrons, improper social distancing, and workplaces not having adequate COVID-19 workplace safety plans. I'm Sarah Buchan for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's time for Queen's Park Weekend Review. We have 3 MPPs on the line. Progressive Conservative David Piccini is with us. He's in Port Hope today. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Northern Ontario, New Democrat John Vantoff from the beautiful community of Cobalt, Ontario. John Vantoff. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Rob.
Cold there today?
Yeah, it's about minus 20.
Minus 20, same as Ottawa. Yeah. Where Stephen Blais is, Liberal MPP, Ottawa, Orleans. Good morning, Stephen. Welcome back.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. Thanks.
Yeah. Coldest day of the year so far in Ottawa. Coldest day of the year.
Coldest capital on the planet today.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
Nice to be first at something, I guess.
Yeah.
So look, let me ask you first. For Steve and I, school is back in Ottawa. Is it back in parts of your riding, John Vantoff? School on Monday.
It's never been not back.
Never been not back. Okay. What about you, David?
It's back for all areas that I represent, with this slight exception of the small portion of Clarington. I encompass 3 public health units. So.
Okay. So back to school in Ottawa for us, in class. What changes, David, have been made, say, to the in-class environment? And then I'll ask your fellow panelists here, because I'm sure they have ideas about what more could be or should be done to make students and staff even more secure. David, go ahead.
Thanks, Rob. Well, first and foremost, it's important to highlight that $1.3 billion investment for reopening that allowed students to return to class safely. I mean, we know that through the increased investments the government's made in cleaning, PPE, improved air quality, for 95+% of schools, which again continues to this day, and hiring more staff to promote physical distancing and cleanliness in schools. The net result of that has been 99.6% of students didn't report a case of COVID in the fall. And so as we, obviously had the troubling numbers shared from the Chief Medical Officer of Health over Christmas and over the holidays, we made additional steps to expand asymptomatic testing in our schools. You'll recall we were the first jurisdiction in Canada to do that proactive measure. We've mandated masks for grade 1 to 3 and outdoors where physical distancing can't be maintained. Enhanced screening protocols for students and staff. As well, and also I think an important component here is as we go is the professional development. I had a constituent call the other day and say, why are we giving these PD days, keep them in class? I think those days are really important when we're working with educational, our leaders, our teachers on the front lines on all of the new enhanced measures, infection prevention control measures, and we're doing that with them as well. So lots going on to keep our students and kids safe.
Okay. John Vantoff, what do you think about what's been done and what could or should be done, in your opinion, sir?
Well, I think looking from the calls we're getting and since our schools have been operating, so it's been pretty obvious. We've pushed right from the start. There should be smaller classes to reduce risk. The government hasn't really responded with that. I get a kick locally when they say that they've made improved air quality standards. Well, in our older schools that should have been thought about while the schools were shut. And I don't know how you're going to improve air quality standards, like put a new filter in the furnace. Is that a big improvement in air quality standards? It's nice to throw around facts and figures, but putting people on the school bus and putting them in classes and switching the classes continually as people drop out, we're having a lot of trouble with that, where kids have had teachers switch 3 or 4 times because the system is so unstable that a lot of people are pulling out.
Okay. Stephen Blais. On safety in the schools, as back to school on Monday, Stephen.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you. We've been calling for smaller class sizes from the beginning. Very disappointed that last summer, as John was saying, was the time to prepare for smaller class sizes, to make the physical changes within the schools to enhance ventilation. And instead of doing that work, the government took a victory lap and claimed victory over COVID-19 across Ontario. It's very, obviously as a parent, I'm happy that school is going back in Ottawa on Monday from a socialization perspective and a learning perspective. But I think we also have to be mindful that we've seen an increase in cases in Northern Ontario recently. The Toronto Star is reporting this morning that there are a number of cases in Sudbury, and so we need to keep an eye on that to ensure that school boards and public health officials have a handle on what's going on, and to make further enhancements beyond the things that David claims has taken place so far.
Okay. Go ahead, David. Yeah, sure.
Thanks. I mean, look, I understand and always welcome this dialogue and feedback from others. I think the little sideswipe there on victory lap is a bit rich. I mean, believe me, nobody in government is doing a victory lap after the decades of systemic failed investments from Mr. Blaise. The government the Liberal government, previous Liberal government, they left our schools in significant challenges with respect to HVAC. So we've made significant investments, brought in standalone filtration units and others into schools, hired additional staff so that we can, support social distancing, bring down class sizes, and, $100 million specifically for more teachers and $100 million more for board priorities, which we know in certain areas of my board include staffing. So without a doubt, I mean, there's always more to do, and I welcome input from Mr. Blais, Mr. Van Hoff, and others on this. But certainly, the government understands that we're always working day in, day out on ways we can improve the safety. And the numbers from the fall show that what we've done has worked.
Did you want to respond there, Steve, to that?
Well, in fairness, the Premier did take a victory lap. He went on a 30-plus riding tour of the province. He claimed that his plan was working, and 4 days later, they had to increase the shutdown in the fall. This was at the same time that Vera Etches in Ottawa here, Rob, you'll remember, was concerned that the system was at the brink of being overwhelmed. So the government has consistently been behind the eight ball. They're slow to pull the trigger. They don't seem to be able to come to any decision-making. And, at various times, it's been unclear as to whether or not they're fully accepting the advice of their own medical experts that are advising them. They need to take that advice. They need to act on it quickly in order to get things under control, so that we can we have that backstop of the vaccines eventually coming. But until then, we need to take all the medical advice that we can in order to plank the curve and, restrict the spread and all the fancy taglines around it, but making sure that the virus is contained as much as possible.
Okay.
Does anyone on the panel know?
I want to hear from John. Let's hear from John first. John,
I just want to make a short point on since our schools have been open, and what's really frustrating the folks up here. And I had a call yesterday. The guy was really frustrated, and rightfully so. Mm-hmm. So his kid gets on a bus with 25 kids.
Right.
Right. Walmart is got all kinds of people in it, buying non-essentials, and yet he's trying to run a small business, and he's shut down. He can only do curbside, and he's losing his shirt. And he's saying, "Well, wait a second. I'm fully on board fighting COVID,
right?
But the rules don't make sense to me."
So he's saying, how come my small business is closed, but 25 kids are getting on a school bus at a time?
And people are walking in and out of Walmart right next to them.
Yeah.
And that's
we've
why
got a blitz on. There's a blitz on about that. There's a blitz on about that.
Rob,
right?
just in terms of acting quickly, though, I really want to go back to this. I'm just wondering if either of the other panelists know how many new teachers have been hired in Ontario.
How many new teachers have been hired?
Just
I don't know. Anybody else know? Anybody else know the answer to David's question?
They don't.
I know. Well, I know that it's enough to not able to reduce class sizes across the province to a level that's being recommended by many leading public health advocates. I know that.
It's
I know
3,400 that have been hired across the province of Ontario, consistently following the advice of our Chief Medical Officer of Health.
What's that, like one for every 10 schools or something?
I'm sorry, David, how many did you say?
3,400.
3,400, okay.
3,400 in the province of Ontario.
And what's the average class size?
The advice of our Chief Medical Officer of Health. And that varies across many jurisdictions. But the practical reality, and I think everybody ultimately has got to be responsible in their own jurisdictions. In mine, I know when we're talking elementary class sizes and the work that I'm doing with our board, we're making sure that class sizes are low. Without a doubt, what MPP Van Hoff alluded to earlier about the challenge of going online and in person is difficult. I don't dispute that, but I think the paramount desire there is to give parents choice and understand the nuances in each family structure. So I stand by that, and we've been working hard to support families that want to keep their kids home, offering that outlet while ensuring a safe in-classroom environment.
Okay, look, we're going to stop here. When we come back, I want to talk about this Dr. Fistman controversy and the allegations that Premier Ford's trying to silence critics in the medical community or questioning his handling of the pandemic. And there is a group of doctors, 200 of them, who say that there should be no for-profit long-term care homes in Ontario anymore. I want to ask you if that's a position you support. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
On January 30th.
Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So there is some breaking news I wanted to tell you about because Mr. Trudeau's doing his Rideau Cottage spiel right now. The government has reached an agreement with the main airlines in this country. They're going to suspend service to the sun destinations. This starts on Sunday. Air Canada, WestJet, Sunwing, Air Transat canceling all air service to all Caribbean destinations and Mexico until April 30th. In the next few weeks, they will require non-essential travelers at land borders to show a negative PCR test prior to entry. And as for people arriving at the airport, because Doug Ford is going to speak to this afternoon at 3 o'clock, here's what the federal government is going to do. When does this come into effect? Does this also come into effect on Sunday, David? Do you know?
No exact timeline. It
Okay.
just says as soon as possible in the next several weeks.
Introducing mandatory PCR testing at the airport for arrivals. After getting tested, travelers will have to wait 3 days at a hotel at their own expense before getting a result. Then they have to isolate for the remainder of a 14-day quarantine. But the 14-day quarantine doesn't have to be in the hotel, as I understand it, David, right? That's right? David's been monitoring this, right? So you land, you take the test, you go right to the hotel, you stay there for 3 days, a government-approved hotel, it says. And after you get the result, then it's off to your 14-day quarantine. That's the latest that we have here on the Rob Snow Show. Our newsroom will have the very latest on that coming up at noon. And again, Doug Ford with a travel-related news conference coming up at 3 this afternoon. You can also hear that on City News. Okay, we have a trio of MPPs with us this morning for Queen's Park Weekend Review. Once again, Progressive Conservative David Piccini, John Vantoff, a Democrat. In Cobalt, Ontario this morning, Stephen Blais is in Orleans. He's the Liberal MPP for Ottawa, Orleans. Premier Doug Ford criticized this week a relationship between a member of the COVID-19 Science Advisory Table and ETFO after there was a report in the Toronto Sun that Dr. David Fissman had been doing paid consultancy work for the union while advising the government on pandemic restrictions. He's an epidemiologist at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto, and as mentioned, did paid work for ETFO. So the accusation is, and there's been this outpouring of support, incredible really, for Dr. David Fissman. There's this allegation out there that Doug Ford is trying to silence his critics. So, David Piccini, true or not? True or not?
Well, I think, look, it's categorically false. I think
categorically
the concern was over the relationship there and the lack of timely disclosure. I mean, this is like doctors gathering around a table drafting policies around a smoke-free Ontario environment, and then finding out one of them, was on retainer for big tobacco. I think we want to know the disclosure and the perceived conflict of interest. However, we've never shied away from tough criticism and that's why Dr. Fissman, despite the objections of many and calls that I've received, Premier Ford insists. We welcome that criticism, and he's still a member of the table. He's still there now. He's still a fierce critic, and Premier Ford welcomes that.
He welcomes it. Okay. John Vantoff, what do you think about this story?
Well, I think of an issue that we've had right from the start.
All right, we're having a little problem with John's phone.
Sorry.
So
right at the start, can you hear me?
Yeah, you hear you better now, John.
Okay,
Yep.
so we've had this problem right from the start. So where they refused to release the people who were actually on these tables, and so if the people of Ontario actually knew what was being proposed medically to the politicians, to the Premier, they would have a better idea of which decisions were made on a political basis, or which and political decisions have to be made. I'm not discounting that. And which decisions are made on a public health basis. And that's part of the whole problem, why people are losing faith in the system, because they can't determine that. And this is emblematic of that.
Okay.
So people question just as much whether someone who is the president of a long-term care company, when he's on those tables, whether his advice is totally without bias. And he has advice to give. So if people knew what that advice was before it got to the Premier, they would be much more comfortable judging for themselves.
I see. Okay. Stephen Blais, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I think clearly, as John says, the government's had an issue with the transparency and the advice they're receiving and what advice they're receiving versus what they're actually doing and taking. I think to compare Dr. Fissman to some tobacco lobbyists is absolutely preposterous. He, as far as I understand, was not providing advice to make things worse. Any advice or criticisms of the government were about how to make things better. And had ETFO or the school boards not hired medical experts and not hired some of the best medical experts to guide them through this process, the government would be complaining that they're just making requests without any scientific basis or backup. And so it's quite clear that the government is trying to target Dr. Fissman and others like Dr. Follis at Wilhelm Osler and try to silence their critics because they know that they're receiving advice that they're not taking. And this is not a secret. The Deputy Medical Officer of Health came out and said we need paid sick leave. She said it expressly, that more needs to be done, and the government has completely ignored her advice. So this is quite clearly an attempt by the government to silence their critics.
Okay, we
Rob,
only...
just on that, wouldn't, if that was the case, wouldn't he have been removed from the table? I mean, that's not happened, right? He's a welcome member of that table, providing input.
If you don't take advice from the table, you don't need to remove him.
If I could just finish, I mean, there's a variety of doctors at that table providing advice, and the idea is that we balance the advice, and that doctor has obviously put forward advice that is unique with respect to the bulk of the other expert opinions we're getting from sick kids and others with respect to the measures we're taking to ensure a safe in-class environment. And it's supported by all of the measures I alluded to earlier on today and the strong numbers with respect to 99.6% of students that have not been infected.
All right, we only have 2 minutes left. Should the private sector continue to have a role to play in long-term care homes, for-profit long-term care homes in Ontario? A group of doctors, 200 of them, called Doctors for Justice, say no. David, what do you say? Very quickly.
Well, the bottom line is I would just say that there's not a jurisdiction in the world that operates long-term care that doesn't incorporate a for-profit model. And I just think, one needs to look, even former Deputy Health Minister Bob Bell said that, we've got to do things like look at staffing, which we've done. We're going to be a leader in Canada and build new facilities after, again, a decade of failure under the previous government. We're building new facilities, 22,000+ new beds coming online, new and improved beds, and that's private and semi-private rooms.
Okay. Yeah, so you say no. Okay, I got to move along here. John Van Toff, what do you think, John?
We have put forward our policy that we believe that for-profit long-term care should be discontinued.
Okay.
Yep. And a good example is if you see the hell that residents in some long-term care homes have gone through, while at the same time those very same companies are paying dividends to their shareholders.
Oh, some of them are raising dividends, actually.
That is proof that in some in care that doesn't, the for-profit model does not put residents first. It puts shareholders first, and that's why it should be discontinued.
Quick answer from you, Stephen Blais. For-profit long-term care homes, should they be discontinued?
Well, we supported a motion opposing for-profit ownership in nursing homes, I think it was this past fall. After the crisis is over, I think a thoughtful dialogue and conversation needs to take place about it. But one thing is clear, any type of government investment into the sector needs to be targeted at prioritizing improvements for outcomes for the residents and families and not improving the outcomes for shareholders, which unfortunately, as we've seen, has happened this year.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to all three of you. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay warm, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah. In Port Hope, David Piccini. In Cobalt, John Van Toff. In Orleans, Stephen Blais. I'm Rob Snow.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
Hi, Ottawa. We at Rogers TV want to invite you to tune in to Operation Support Local. The idea behind this show is to share stories of those individuals and organizations who have gone above and beyond to help the most vulnerable in our community. We're also going to highlight local businesses who are just starting to get back on their feet, of course, with new protocols put in place to keep us all safe. We're going to share stories each Friday. I encourage you to tune in for new episodes of Operation Support Local.